Good evening, Wakefield. I'm calling to order the Town Council meeting of October 21st, 2024 at 6:32 p.m. I'm going to ask for a motion that we go into a possible executive session to discuss contractual matters because an open session may have detrimental effects on the bargaining position of the town, with the intent of returning to open session immediately thereafter.
So moved.
Second.
We'll take a roll call vote. Do we have Councilor Chines up on the screen or available?
He's there.
Yeah, he's there.
Oh, okay, must be the cataracts. I will start with Councilor Chines.
Yes.
Councilor Butler.
Yes.
Councilor Vincent.
Yes.
Councilor Butt.
Yes.
And I am a yes, Sherry, that is 5-0. We will now go into executive session. Wakefield, welcome back. Welcome us back. We are back to regular session at 6:47 on the Town Council meeting of October 21st, 2024. We already have had our call to order. We have 5 councilors present and 1 on Zoom. Going to ask everyone to please rise and face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we've been through attendance, I believe. Sherry, do we have any public engagement tonight?
Yes, we do. We have Scott McCauley. He is coming over in a minute.
Okay.
Hi, Scott. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good
Sorry
evening.
for the delay. When Sherry connects us, everything drops off and changes and then it pops back up. So thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I had a few different things that I wanted to talk about, but things were changing and evolving. Mostly, I wanted to, as you know, I've been following a lot of things closely in town. There's a lot of different things that I presented, some open meeting law violations and other stuff. And I've been paying more attention to as many boards as I can. I find it difficult that sometimes key boards are on the same evening. Like I would have liked to go to the bylaw review committee tonight, but it's on the same time meeting that you're holding. So you might want to consider some of these having on off nights from some of the largest things like school committee, town council, which are the bigger ones in town. But that isn't really what I want to talk about.
Mr. McCauley, could I interrupt you for 1 second, please? You didn't state your
Sure.
name and your address at the beginning, if you wouldn't mind.
Sorry, Scott McCauley, 32 Walden Road.
Thank you.
I should know better, I'm sorry. So I watched, again, the Economic Development Council the other night. I was surprised to see on the recording what was talked about, because I've been following this group pretty regularly lately, and I missed that evening. And based upon the agenda, I really didn't expect any surprises. They voted on $835,000 worth of expenditures the other night, based on an agenda item that simply said ARP funds allocation discussion. Part of the reason why they had to vote on that much money is because I had found out that 2 of the members had not been sworn in. So legally, there was votes that needed to be retaken. So I would think that, and not just a boilerplate item as ARP funds allocation discussion would be listed, and that they would have actually listed what they were re-voting on. Then they voted on some other items. And then there was one item that the chair brought up that she just thought about that morning. So I would think that the town needs to put together some examples of what would be a ideal agenda to give to the boards in town. I think there needs to be more due diligence on the side of the town to make sure that people are aware of the process and how to do these things. I had reached out because the zoning board had scheduled a meeting on primary day, which was against the law. If the zoning board had voted on anything of substance, the town of Wakefield might have been in a legal situation. I think a lot more attention needs to be paid to these different types of things. I've reached out. There was some question about the open meeting law certification that people are required to fill out within 2 weeks of taking their elected position. The boards and committees, quite a number of them have done that, which Sherry oversees. All the elected officials in town, my understanding is not one of them had completed that out of any elected things. Now, I know recently Betsy had sent out an email to everybody. My understanding is that's been a very slow response in getting those all back. So that's something that you might want to check up on, because that'll help eliminate some of the stuff of people actually reading what the open meeting law stuff is. Conflict of interest statements. I know for a fact I did a spot check on some names, and there was a number of them that hadn't completed the conflict of interest. I was surprised at some of them actually. And
Mr. McCauley, I'm sorry to say we have reached the 3 minutes. You know the rule.
okay, that's another thing I wanted to bring up. Would this be considered public hearings as part of our bylaws? Because under Chapter 9, boards, committees, and commissions, public hearings under bylaws says that I'm allowed up to 5 minutes.
The answer I get from the town administrator is no. Could you explain, Steve?
I think this is not a public hearing, it is a public meeting. And it is the policy of the town council, board of selectmen at the time, to allow public participation at their meetings that aren't public forums or public hearings of up to 3 minutes. So
Okay.
if we were doing tax
that.
classification or something, you could go longer.
I'll forward this to you so that you can review it. My take
Okay.
on this was something different, but I appreciate the time.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else for public participation tonight, Sherry?
No, that's it.
Okay, nobody in the room for public participation. I think we recognize folks in the room. That being the case, item 6 is licensing. We have a Class 1 license. This is actually a transfer, I believe, GTA Subaru Acquisition LLC at 618 North Ave. Would you like to comment on that, Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council. For the record, Attorney Brian McGrail here on behalf of my client, GTA Subaru Acquisition LLC. With me tonight is George Albrecht Jr. He is the manager of GTA. The Albrecht family, through various entities, currently owns 7 dealerships, including Albrecht Buick GMC, located at 614 North Avenue in Wakefield. Their pending acquisition of Wakefield Subaru will be their 8th dealership. GTA Subaru Acquisition LLC is purchasing Subaru of Wakefield, located next door to Albrecht Buick GMC at 618 North Avenue in Wakefield, with a closing scheduled to occur on October 31st of this year. Thus, they have applied for a Class 1 dealer license for the Subaru dealership at 618 North Avenue. The Albrecht family is recognized as a leader in the automotive industry. They have a great reputation for excellence in service to their customers, many of whom are Wakefield residents that frequent the GMC and Buick dealership on North Avenue. They have a proud history of community involvement. They've participated in sponsorships of various programs in the town, and their acquisition of Subaru will make them vested even more in the town of Wakefield, having 2 dealerships right next door to each other, and they anticipate more involvement with the community. They're also planning renovations for both dealerships coming up in the not-too-distant future, again showing their vested interest in our town and being a good business partner in the community. So we're respectfully requesting the town council to issue a Class 1 dealer license to GTA Subaru Acquisition LLC at 618 North Avenue in Wakefield. And actually, it's a new license. Uniquely with dealerships, with car dealership licenses, there's really no transfer process like it would be with an alcohol license. And as part of our package, Subaru of Wakefield has submitted a letter acknowledging that they will be surrendering their license once the transfer takes place. So there wouldn't be 2 licenses, obviously, active at the property. With that said, Mr. Chair, we're happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
First thing I usually do, Counselor, is to ask Sherry if everything is in order.
Everything is in order.
Okay, any questions from the counselors? Counselor Dombrowski?
Thank you, Mr. McGraw, for providing this information. Something that stands out to me is you had mentioned that there are planned reservations or planned renovations for both dealerships. You said in the not too distant future. When did Albrecht Buick GMC acquire the Volvo location, the prior Volvo location?
You test me. I think it was 2022.
I think it was even earlier than that.
Might have been earlier, 21.
We were leasing part of the property at one point for quite some time, actually. I think it goes back to 2004, actually. We exercised a right of first refusal to purchase it. I want to say it was either somewhere in the latter half of 18 or early part of 19, I
is my
believe.
recall, yeah.
We didn't assume control of the operation until sometime late, I want to say in 19, maybe late summer, earliest. And GMC opened officially on May 19th of 2020,
Yeah.
in the middle of the pandemic.
It's correct. I'm looking at the application.
Yeah, 'cause
Councilor
I thought it was around
Dombrowski
19.
was January 2020.
Because when you were here last, relative to that acquisition, when it was Volvo was being replaced, there had been similar representations about renovation and signage and the like. And I have to tell you candidly, it's been 5 years, and there's temporary signage there. I've seen no discernible renovation whatsoever to that facade or that building in any way. And you're talking about being a good partner, Mr. McGraw, and I take you at your word on that. I do believe that may be what you hope for your client to be, but it's not what we're seeing. And half a decade in, to see that in the same state, I mean, it's basically the Volvo dealership with the sign Volvo taken down and a temporary plastic sign thrown up there. It doesn't present well as the entryway or the gateway into our community. And I'd like more specifics on what the not too distant future means and what we're talking about in terms of renovations and work and meaningful work to be done, because I think that it's quite unattractive. And from a business standpoint, I don't think that it's a great location, certainly, don't get me wrong, right off the highway. But in practical terms, I don't think it is a good partner for our community at present, the way it presents. So what are the details? What are the specifics?
I can
What's
tell
the
you this,
timeline?
we were before the Zoning Board of Appeals and received approvals to do renovations on the property.
Uh-huh.
And part of the issues that you have with the dealerships is the manufacturers somewhat dictate on how things are going to be done and how they have mandates on dealerships looking the same way. And
As they should,
as they
candidly.
should. And what we were ready to start those renovations, and then the program with GMC changed again. So those were put on hold, and we actually had an architectural meeting this past week on both dealerships with the Albrecht's architect to look at designs for those buildings on the renovations. Because the coordination to do this, you have to keep the dealership open while you're doing renovations into a new construction of different buildings, which might actually take place on that property as part of these renovations.
But we've seen a lot of, even within a mile radius, I think of like the Kelly Nissan, for instance. That renovation happened in a really short amount of time for the transition over. I mean, there's a new Kia on Route 1 that looks like phenomenal. I don't know that Kia is necessarily known as like a luxury brand to most folks, but the dealership certainly connotes something that this dealership does not. I mean, Buick and GMC, I think, are two very solid brands. Yeah. But I don't think that facility is in any way indicative of how it should be looking, nor do I think that should be the gateway into our community. But that's what everyone coming off that exit is seeing coming in. And I think that we need to have more of a commitment from the owners to do better than that.
Okay. George, you want to address what the goals are on the site for Council Dombrowski?
Yeah,
and your time
certainly.
frames,
And respectfully, I believe it was 4 years from when we appeared. It's a difference of a year or whatever. But the reality is that we spent well in excess of 6 figures planning with architects and engineers, going through the process with you. We have to pay the factories. They have subcontracted engineering and architectural engineering firms that have oversight initially into the project. We went through the whole process, knowing that I would have to do all of that again. My zone manager, my local sort of management representative from GMC said, hey, for the first time, I know you're done and you're about to get started. For the first time in over 25 years, General Motors, GMC in particular, has decided to change their environmental design initiative. You can proceed, but when you're done, you're going to look like you have a brand new 25-year-old building. I don't think that's what you want. I suggest you wait until the new initiative comes out, which was supposed to take about 6 months. It took about 18 months until it came out just a few months ago. In the process, the Subaru dealership, which we already own the property, approached us and asked us if we'd like to buy their dealership. It was sort of something we'd long discussed. When they were ready, we'd talk about it. That complicates, of course, the project with the GMC side too. And now we're looking at, we don't have final plans, of course, because this has all happened very recently. But I've re-enrolled in the GMC program, and on the Subaru side, now we have to look at how do I operate both stores while, instead of doing a retrofit to GMC, it's now more likely that I would like to build a new facility entirely. Probably the same on the Subaru side. Again, we're mired in the logistics and costs of all of that. But I think the town and the public would be pleased with the results. And it doesn't help us to delay. I could have been done with this. But again, I'd have, to my zone manager's quote, a 25-year-old brand new, 25-year-old looking brand new building. And that has caused these delays.
So at this point, you don't have approval of the new GMC design through ZBA, and you've not even started with Subaru, obviously, since you're just acquiring them.
They're going to have to happen in tandem at this point as we're acquiring it, is my thought, because of how they interplay on essentially the same lot, even though it's two distinct properties.
So that means that you're basically back to square one, because if you have to get Subaru on board and figured out and through ZBA before you do anything, there's not going to be any sort of improvement on either property until Subaru gets to the
That would have happened with
green
GMC
light, right?
regardless, I believe, based on my limited understanding of the process, since they changed the whole program.
So there's no timeline then, basically, at this point. Like you're sitting here tonight, you can't say that within a year we'll see new facilities, or 2 years, or 6 months, or right? There's no timeline.
Well, George, I mean,
Definitively, no. Between permitting delays and other things, I couldn't possibly answer that specifically. Would that be our intent? Absolutely. 2 years-ish.
I mean,
That's
Albrecht,
permitting,
you know,
construction,
there's
all the process.
couple of points. Related entity owns both properties. So they're very vested. They actually own the real estate. It's a different entity, but it's the same family.
We've got a lot of people who own real estate in town. It doesn't mean that they're good
No,
neighbors,
I understand
as
that,
you know.
but you know,
Yeah.
and the second part of it is, you know, Albrecht they're a significant entity, and they're in the business of running good dealerships. I mean, this is not a Class 2 used car dealership. This is you know, two major entities that will be operating there with major brands that are not going to, you know, they don't want the properties to look, you know, not up to their standards. Just a matter of getting it right. But I do understand the concern and respect it.
And I know that's a high-volume Subaru dealership. Obviously, it's quite lucrative. I understand that to be the case. But I guess my parting concern, and I think I speak on behalf of many of the residents, is those of us who drive by that every day feel like there's not been any progress made. And I think it would go a long way to demonstrate a commitment to the community by doing everything possible to try to get both of those into better condition, but especially the Buick GMC, which is certainly not. The Subaru is different. But I would appreciate if through Mr. McGrail, if you could provide the town with periodic updates as to where we stand on this.
Absolutely.
Because that's candidly a condition of my vote, an expectation, you know, an unenforceable expectation, if you will, that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions from other counselors? Yes, Counselor Butler.
Do you have a ballpark for what the tax revenue to the town is from the 3 properties?
No, well, I think you have real estate tax revenue, and then
Yeah. And then the sale.
and then you have the excise tax from, you know, autos and run the lot, I believe, too. I Am I correct on that, Steve?
Do
That
we,
this-
do we get
yeah.
excise tax for the dealership ones? Not only if we buy
No.
them here.
For the,
Yeah.
but we own a lot of vehicles too, though, so you
Yeah.
would.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you pay excise tax?
Yeah,
on-
loaner fleets and plow
Yeah.
trucks, company vehicles, things such as that.
Oh, and you run them through
Parts
each
delivery.
dealership versus at a larger scale?
Yeah, typically.
Okay.
Did you have anything, Counselor Chines? You just look a little foggy there, so I want to make sure I don't.
I know.
Okay.
I apologize. I'm not in a great place visually, but no, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I can
just-
tell I thought I had the assessment.
Yeah, it looks like they're assessed
Yeah.
at around 9 or 10.
That's about
And we
right.
paid 13 a
Yep.
number of years back. I guess as opposed to Councilor Dombrowski, I mean, not that I'm not a fan of dealerships. We have a lot of clients that are dealerships, but are there plans to are you buying them out to potentially develop the area? Because, by the way, I would love for the entrance to the town not to be a parking lot.
I think the question is, are you going to make condos over there?
I don't care what he makes.
The intent is
That's not our intent.
The intent
Yeah.
is to just keep the dealerships.
correct.
Okay.
One question I had, Mr. Albrecht, was you said the projects will have to be done in tandem. It sounds complicated now that you have two potentially competing dealerships that you own both. I mean, is that going to slow things down because Subaru and GM might be battling with each other in some fashion?
No, it's a meeting Mr. McGrail mentioned that we had earlier last week. Last week. We actually think by raising the Buick GMC building, we can make the project faster and deliver two much more attractive, much more efficient brand new buildings. That
So
will
you-
allow us to operate while doing it. We're still looking for some review from civil engineering just to make sure that we meet all the setback requirements. We have a large county sewer easement through the middle of the property is one concern that we have to work around.
So do you see further development on the Subaru side, or you're pretty okay with what you've got there? The Subaru dealership, are you talking about renovations there as well?
Yes,
You are.
yes.
So you'll be doing both at once, you think? Or one at a time?
Phased, but yeah, sort of all together, but one step at a time.
Probably GM first?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, there's a lot to review with how that will be phased, but
I won't
yes.
quote, I won't quote you if,
No, that's our intent, and
if
that
some
way,
dealer control changes what your plans are. I get it. I know you've got to deal with GM and you've got to deal with Subaru as well.
just fitting the boxes on the property as much as anything. Their designs are usually just more look than so that. We think we can make them big enough to satisfy their requirements in that regard.
Yeah. Have you done this at your other dealerships? Do you have any dealerships up in Danvers? I mean, some of them that I've
I don't
been
own
to-
any in Danvers.
Yeah.
We own, the biggest one we own is Uber and Toyota, which is far and away the largest car dealership in, I don't know, north of Florida, as far as I know. Because we have a lot of indoor storage because we're in the off-ramp, strangely, there. So that is indoor parking, not so much parking lot. And Infinity of Nashua, I built a brand new facility in 2016. It's a beautiful store. So yes, we do have experience and others, but those are the two most recent ones.
Thank you. Any other questions from counselors?
I just have one quick question. I was trying to get through my head. So is it that is it the Subaru dealership right now, the building is okay or adequate, just needs to be renovated, and you'd say you would probably, if you were redoing it, you'd tear down the GMC? The plan is to demo the GMC in whatever one you put forth.
They might
before
both be demoed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Great.
that's a possibility.
I just wasn't sure
Yeah.
if it was planning.
Yeah.
They're old buildings that have been
Yeah.
added onto somewhat strangely
So
over
sort of
time
chopped
for
up.
modern use. Yeah, they're very choppy.
Okay.
And part of the logistics we talked about, is how they can operate and maybe share a building while one's being rebuilt, and
Yeah.
it's just the logistics.
Energy
you do.
efficiency is another big one.
Because you sort of still want to sell cars while
While you're under
working.
construction,
No question.
yeah, correct.
We
And,
need
and repair cars,
Yeah.
yeah.
That too.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion that we approve the Class 1 license sought by GTA Subaru Acquisition LLC as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call. Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Yep.
Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Carney, welcome. And I am a yes, so that is 7-0. Sherry, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Albrecht, and best of luck to you in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
And we're
I
happy to
appreciate
come
it,
back
everyone.
whenever you want for updates.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you leaving now, Mr. McGrath?
I plan on it.
Would you do me the favor of, we
You need something out of your car?
No, sir. We are going to request that you ask your clients that what many of us affectionately refer to as the Molise building, whether they will come into our next early November meeting and give us an update.
Yes. Well, we promise to do that, and we're ready, willing, and able. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Have a good evening,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Item 7, we have presentations and updates. The start one is Xed out. This is grant of easement locations. Town administrator can give us a quick reason why that is off.
Yes, this was for National Grid. National Grid completed some of their test borings and found out that where they wanted the grant of location easement was not going to work. So they will be back probably at either our next meeting on 11/4 or 11/18. Bill?
I'm thinking 4. The 4th.
Okay. So sorry, but it's a preview of stuff to come.
All right, certainly seems like a moot point at present. So
Yes.
moving on to B, town-owned buildings and land update. We have invited town engineer, Mr. Renault, tonight. I think I would just start with a quick comment that we probably have one that's off the table, which is probably 5 Common, because the town council has previously voted not to have any offices in the Warren Center or the Senior Center, which is the Warren Building. That being the case, I've discussed this with the town administrator, and he's got 10 people in and out of 5 Common, so we're probably not going to be looking at doing anything to sell that building in the near future. Do I have that more or less correct?
I would say we have the Health and Human Services there, the Treasurer's Office there, so there is, I have no place else to put them, so yes.
Okay, any questions or comments on that specific building from the council? I don't want to give this short shrift, but seems obvious that, we should be focusing our discussions more on other properties like Butler and the Hurd building.
Chairman, Mr. Jones has his hands up.
Okay, I can't even see it. Counselor Chines, please.
Thank you, and again, apologies for the bad visuals. I just, on the 5 Common Street, I would just ask that we continue to look at that, in a flexible way. I mean, we have staff there that we don't have a place to put, but I do remain concerned that we have a very large building there, most of which is inaccessible, both to our staff and certainly to the public. It just doesn't strike me as a very efficient use of our resources, and so I just want to make sure that we continue to think creatively about what we might be able to do either to activate that building in a cost-effective way or find, other locations for the staff that's there. And, to the extent that that's not the senior center, that's fine. But I would just ask Mr. Mayo that we sort of keep that, as something that we're looking at, because again, it's just not an ideal situation right now, given, the expense of maintaining that building and the relatively small footprint that we're using inside it.
Okay, sure.
Just out of curiosity, Counselor, do you have any ideas?
I don't off the top of my head, but again, I don't think it's a discussion point or a decision point for today, but I think it's something that we should just continue to be aware of. If we were fully occupying the building, that would be one thing, but again, it's, a very large building that is mostly vacant because it's not accessible.
Right, I understand. I don't want to pay the cost either if it's underutilized, but if we don't have any place to put those 10 people, we have to, as you say, we have to continue to talk about where they would go. Right now, I'm not aware of any place they would go. Counselor Dombrowski.
I'm just wondering, I don't think we've got to this point, Steve, with 5 Common, but has there been any discussion about if, because the building, the structure has been so bastardized at this point, it's not at all like what it used to look like. It's terrible. Has there been any discussion or assessment of if we were to just raise the building and build something anew, what kind of cost estimates we come in?
I haven't done that, but we can. I can pull something together on that.
I think it'd be helpful to know because, you know, when I go in that building, I just look at, there is underutilization, but it's also terribly laid out. The idea of putting an elevator in that building in the condition that it's in now doesn't make a lot of practical sense. You know, like making it ADA compliant, which it should be, obviously.
Yep.
It doesn't make sense to.
We are using
pour
the
money
second
into
floor
it.
for non-public offices right now, but even that's,
Yeah.
you know. My thought always had been, if we were to raise it, connect it to the town hall, because we have an elevator, that we are not putting in a second elevator. That's probably $1 million savings, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I just think that, you know, again, it's probably not the top of most agendas, but as we continue to go down this path with 5 Common, I suspect we'll continue to have significant capital improvements that need to be made just to maintain it. And like, what's the value to
Right.
us of what we're maintaining?
Yeah, we can look at that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from counselors on 5 Common at the moment? One other question, Steve, because I was surprised to hear that we're using the second floor for non-town offices. Could you explain, please?
No, they're
Are
town
these-
offices.
Oh, town offices.
Town offices,
Okay,
yeah. They're
town offices.
non-public facing people, so they're not seeing the public. Like I have the emergency management director on the second floor. He can come down for meetings, and I have the treasurer's office on the second floor. So
Okay,
the,
and we have Health and Human Services?
Health and Human Services and the treasurer's staff on the
Staff.
first floor.
Right.
Yeah.
And Health and Human Services, are they actually doing business in
Oh,
that
yes.
building?
Yes, we
relative
see
to-
quite a few, social worker sees quite a few people there. He has a private office in there because of the sensitivity of that information that we take. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Counselor Chines?
Sorry, just one other thing that I would ask that we kind of put in the bucket to evaluate is also like what is the value to us of selling the building, and assuming that we would obviously need to find space for what's already in there. Does that create an opportunity again to look at, adding on to town hall or building somewhere else? I mean, I would imagine, given the location, that it's a valuable piece of property, and even if it's something where, I don't know, as an example, we sold the building with a provision that, a floor would be reserved for town use and the rest could be developed for something else, or, we did something in terms of a public-private partnership there. It just feels like there's an opportunity for creativity there, and I think kind of along the lines of Councilor Dombrowski's comments, while it's not the most urgent issue we have on our plate, it does feel that we should do some costing of both renovations, sales, any other options that we can do to just improve the property both for the town and for the uses that we need.
Counselor Butt?
I think also just to echo what Councilor Chine said and Councilor Dombrowski is, I know we're talking about kind of specific buildings, but it'd be nice to have an overview of all town owned. And so I know we had spent a lot of time talking about the renovations we're doing in the senior center, but I'd love to, when we start the budget discussion in a couple of months again, have Dan McGrath come in here and talk about the civil center and civic center and, some of the rented space and who's moving out, because those are town owned, and what we're doing with that building. And last weekend I went to a great event at the ACE building, and I'm really proud of how we've that building looks amazing now, and it was a great art show. But and we have a great bathroom on the first floor, but we've always talked about the upstairs,
The elevator,
and I'd
yeah.
love to start talking about that's wasted space up there. And so is there something that we could do with the offices, the space up there? So I'd love to kind of in 2025 start discussing those as well, in addition to the renovations that we're doing at the senior center and the Hurd building.
Counselor Carney?
Right now, I think we're rich in property at a time when property is as valuable as it's going to get. And so it was invested a lot of money in the senior center, and I think it's well worth it. If selling some of these other properties, multiple properties, taking that money and finding a way of creating parking at the senior center, and if that requires eminent domain or looking for anything in the area where a house is being sold or what have you to expand it, because that's the issue up there is parking. It's right now, I think, succeeded its parking requirements for the number of folks that go up there and take advantage of the activities they have there. So if we corrected the parking problem there, I think that building would be much more, useful to the town. And some of these other buildings that we're paying to maintain at a time when I think any property that we sell out there is going to get premium prices today. We shouldn't wait. When we sold the school across the street from me, it was a time when property was the lowest values, and we got very little in return. So it's something I think we ought to be looking at as an entire plan, and not just saying, okay, let's replace the offices and make them adjoining to the current town hall. Look at all of the office spaces, including the AmeriCal, and how do we maximize those by taking advantage of the value that we have there, assets that we have that we could get rid of it for the benefit of the community, my opinion.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Butler?
Yes, I come from the other side of the aisle with regards to Councilor Carney's opinion there. I don't know where property values are going, but I do know that like 5 years ago, I would have thought that property values couldn't get any higher. And 3 years ago, we would have thought that property values weren't getting any higher. And now we're sitting here saying that we don't think property values, you're saying property values are at their peak. I don't think we know where property values are going to be in 10 years. It's not like, yes, it's been up and to the right for a long time, but I wouldn't want the town council to become real estate speculators. But I do know that one of the things you can't do, the town can never buy, or almost can never buy, unless we become a dilapidated community. We'll never be able to buy property we sell. We're never going to be able to buy property up on the public market unless Wakefield has a tremendous downturn, in which case, we'll be having other fires to fight. So I don't think that I'm pretty opposed to across the board sales, and I've been a vocal opponent of the herd sale for like a gazillion years.
Actually, Councilor Butt has mentioned the ACE building. You are our disability person in town, correct?
That is correct.
Are we making any progress? I know I was probably at the same function that Councilor Butt is referring to. Are we making any progress? There was a KMA report multiple years ago that talked about how we did need to make some handicapped accessible changes. Yep. So do you have a ballpark price on that? And I know we don't have the money in our pockets at the moment.
Yeah. So the KDA study was a little flawed in some aspects of it, where it was looking at putting elevators on other properties that the town didn't own. So what we've done,
right, but they talked about the entrance. The entrance to the building is not
right.
No,
understood.
Right?
Yeah. And so that
I'm trying to focus on the simple.
You want to go with the simple? I get both.
Yeah.
So we'll go simple first. Okay. Yeah. So looking at that entrance, either front or rear, we began with some preliminary sketches on kind of how that would work. The front, really, the problem ends up being that you would have to widen that sidewalk out and lose more parking on Albion. That may come as a recommendation, or at least as a proposal to folks down the line. I'm looking at a couple of other kind of outdoor systems that would work more like railings with stairs, but then they convert into a lift. So that's something that's new that I'm looking at. We also expanded our easement in the back as part of the bank redevelopment project. So as that was going on, I was able to negotiate to expand that easement to allow us to have a little bit more room in the back to play with to get these things compliant. So the rear entrance may be where it ends up because we have a little bit more room now. What would not have us taking parking, which I think might make sense. But we're still vetting those out. Interior-wise, though, we are looking at an elevator. So I have prices for the structural and for the design of that to do an internal elevator that would go with the spiral staircases. So that's something that I'm evaluating. We did go after a grant. Unfortunately, we just found out last week that we were unsuccessful with that grant. So we had a $1 million grant that we had requested.
This was the one we ran through Representative Moulton, was it, Steve? Or-
This wasn't
Distressed properties.
distressed properties, but we also did the same with Moulton as well. We
Right.
heard back from Moulton a while back that we didn't get it. We just heard back from the state. Very competitive, doesn't mean that we're not going to go after it again, so we'll be in a better position once we get the design completed, so we'll have a real design and say we're ready to go. In this
Right.
application, we said, we still have to get design money to do certain portions of it.
I guess I personally look at it, from a first floor and second floor perspective. It seems that we are having functions there.
Yeah.
And if we are, certainly the first floor and the handicap accessibility would be the primary and probably not as costly as an elevator.
Without a doubt, without a
In
doubt.
dealing with the second floor, which is currently a mess.
Yeah,
in a word.
but there are real infrastructure improvements that you got to do in either direction. So that's what it comes
Right.
down to. So there's still
Right.
street work or, I guess sidewalk work that you do in the back way. So there
Right,
are
okay.
work, but it's things that we're looking at. So
Didn't
I'll
mean
be
to
coming in
digress,
with-
but this is another town-owned building we should be thinking about.
Yep.
Whether it's handicap accessible or not,
Yep.
when we're bringing people in and out of it.
Without a doubt. It's actually, so in our transition plan, so we do a townwide transition plan looking at different areas that we need to improve for, any type of barrier that, whether it's communication, whatever it may be, right? It can be physical for like curb ramps. So we have a whole plan of all ADA improvements that are needed throughout town. That's by far the number one. So we're, we received $50,000 in capital funds. That would go towards the design here to get us in there. We also have some additional ADA funds for that kind of quick fix that I was talking about and seeing if I can make that work. I'm not sure the weatherproofing for that system or not, and that's what I'm looking at to see.
So we have funds, we don't have the
We have some
design?
funds, yep, we have some funds to do the elevator design, to get that completed, so that'll help us in future grants. And then also, we have some additional transition plan money that's left over that I'm looking to apply towards that too. So it's all focusing right now on the ACE with the monies that I have. That's where I'm focusing it.
Okay, Councilor Butler, did you have a question?
Yeah, I heard Steve for a number. Are we saying that it costs $1 million to put an elevator in?
Yeah.
In that
Uh,
ballpark,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, it's pretty. It's not cheap.
insane.
Yeah.
Like that's not what it costs everywhere else. Like in commercial buildings and anywhere else, like that, putting in a two-story elevator should not cost $1 million.
Well, we also have the foundation that needs to happen. There's a lot of structural components to it. So there's a lot of other things that go with it. It's not just the actual cart itself. That's cheaper, no doubt. But there's structural components to make it work.
It just feels like we're, again, I'm, very pro the ADA, but it feels like anytime we have the notion of renovating, we come up with an absurd number if we want to not do the project. Again, I digress.
Councilor Chines, I can't tell whether your hand's up or not, so I'm going to ask you, I'll keep bugging you, just to see.
No questions about this other than just appreciation to Mr. Renault for keeping this on the agenda. I do think this is a property that I would love to see accessible. I'd love to see the upper floors activated. But we've been working on it for a while because of the cost of doing the elevator. I mean, a few years ago, when that study came out that was referenced, I think the cost of the elevator at that point was somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000. So I'm not surprised that we're talking about $1 million today, given that that's probably 5 or 6 years ago now. But I appreciate the design work going on, and I hope that will be successful in getting some grant funds to make something happen.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Carney.
$1 million does seem outrageous. It has to be some factors involved.
Oh,
Maybe
big time, yeah. So the
the
basic.
foundation underneath the building.
Exactly, exactly.
I mean,
yeah.
there's requirements today that didn't exist
Yeah.
when this building was.
I know George Albrecht's not going to pay $1
Pardon?
million to put in a two-story elevator in his new
Well, no was easy.
New's a lot easier.
New's a lot easier.
Yeah, you're retrofitting. We have to relocate essentially all the utilities, how they come in and out of the building to get it through that corridor. So
it's a
there's-
story.
yeah.
It'd be nice if we could get a breakdown of why
That's
what
why
the actual factors are that are creating this outrageous price.
Right. I mean, I'm just the person here who speaks up about numbers that seem like very bizarrely off.
Well,
So
that's where I was when I heard it too.
Yeah.
So we brought in an architect to give us a fee, you know, like what he would expect it to be based on some recent bids and retrofits. So that's where that number came from. He was high eights, I think, is where.
This is for the common, or this is for Ace?
No, this is for Ace. Yeah, so I had somebody based on bids that were just completed within the last year. But again, every project's different. It depends on when you're bidding it. It could come in lower. But that's why we're gonna spend the $50,000 on the design, look at all the factors. I mean, we have a foundation we gotta put in, we gotta relocate, essentially all the utilities on how they come into the building, all that stuff adds up. So we'll have a better handle in the future, and I'm happy to come in and chat about it.
Councilor Carney.
I guess as part of that, this further discussion, you know, how much of that cost is risk in the sense that, you know, looking at the building as it now stands,
Yep.
there are risks involved that they can't distinguish until such time as they start the construction.
Without a doubt.
That's part of the factors here. So
Yeah.
I'd like to know what part of that is, and then we can discuss it intelligently. But until we do, we really don't know.
And do we have to put one in, or is it just we have to put one in if we want the public to go to the second floor?
There's no as-built drawings of this.
No. It's more a
So
question, are
you
we
can't ask
thinking
it.
about an elevator that's gonna be used 15 times a year?
Oh, what, are you kidding me?
Depending on the use of what.
Depending on the use.
I think it depends. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, like, how much do we care about it? Like, not, like, is it worth $1 million or whatever it is for that area to become accessible to the public, or should we just have offices or something else up there? Like, that's the trade-off.
Well, that is a question for the council. That's why, in my opinion, these are two different parts of the same project.
Yep.
I would guess that it's much less cost to simply make the first floor ADA compliant.
It's definitely not $1 million, I can
It's
guarantee
not $1
that.
million.
Yeah, for sure.
So then the question is, and the council has discussed it, I think before you two councilors were on, as to whether the second floor would be artist lofts or whether they'd be rented out and so on and so forth. So that all remains to be seen. So that's the use aspect, I think, that you're talking about. What is going to happen with the second floor? Remains to be seen. Councilor Dombrowski?
But if we did anything substantive, like any sort of substantial work on the second floor, wouldn't that necessitate it being ADA?
It could trigger, yeah.
But because we're kind of saying like, oh, well, we can just use the second floor for like offices. Well, no, you can't, because if you have someone with a disability that's working for the town, we can't use that for offices.
Yeah,
So,
as soon as you hit a certain threshold, so as soon as you trigger a certain amount of repair within the building, that's what triggers you to put the elevator in. So we would hit that
I think it's
with,
30%.
yeah, 30% of the value of the building, yeah, typically.
So if you sold 5 Common, would you have enough money to do the elevator in the second floor?
I'll let you know.
but I just think it's something, I mean, it feels like if we're going to meaningfully use the second floor for almost anything,
Sure.
then presumably that would trigger the need for an elevator.
Yeah, I mean, so up there, you folks have all been there, I'm assuming, right, on the second floor?
Oh,
So-
I have.
So you have it, it's already sort of carved up to some degree. I mean, you'd be looking at sprinklers. There's a bunch of things that would need to happen, and all that would be done as part of the project. So, again, the big piece too is the utilities coming in. So think of your house, if you had to relocate your services coming into the house. I mean, that's right where the spiral staircase is. That's where it makes the most amount of sense from a financial standpoint, because you have that whole corridor for the, for the cart to go up. So, but that's why we're hiring the structural to look at this, give us some recommendations, and get us a cost in today's dollars of what that would be. Again, when Steve's throwing out the $1 million, that includes some additional work besides just the cart, and that was based on a completely separate bid from an architect that I know that provided me a cost of it as I was preparing an application for a grant. So take all that in its totality.
And then it's chopped up now, like, what if you did, I mean, I guess what is the premise? Is the premise that we want to renovate it? Because, by the way, the other thing is we could not renovate it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the discussion to let me know what you want to do. Yeah,
I mean,
at
right
some
now we
point.
have this beautiful building and the second floor is not being used, right, Steve? Nobody's
It
out
could
there.
be used.
And Steve just told us
Storage,
that he
it would have
has,
to be
he's
upgraded
hired more
anyway.
people
Yeah.
that we don't have space. So it is.
No, he's not putting
in-
anybody in the ace, is he?
No.
No.
Right now, no.
No, but he wouldn't ever. Probably.
Probably not.
Yeah. So if we're gonna make it artist
Probably
space or
put these
something
people
like that, then
Town
just
employees
leave it
probably wouldn't go to
chopped
Ace.
up.
Why?
I think we
be
have to have a
hired.
conversation,
Yeah.
and we haven't talked about it in a while, and I think including Dan McGrath, who's kind of, the rec center is kind of doing that building. I, you're doing yoga moves, Ian. I would love to conversation. I don't know why we wouldn't convert it to office space also, if we have people who need offices that work for the town, but it's being not used at all right now. It's such a waste of space, of good space. So we have to get it functional and usable.
Councilor Chines, I see a hand.
No, just wanted to echo and agree with Councilor Butt's comments. I mean, as we've talked about 5 Common and the Albion Cultural Exchange building, we have 2 buildings that effectively are at maybe 50% capacity, probably less because of the accessibility issue. It just feels to me like the cost of carrying a whole bunch of unusable real estate is not a particularly good investment on the town's part. And so, whether it's offices, whether it's artist lots, whether it's, community space, if we're not getting, everything that we need out of the renovations to the senior center, it does feel like there's an opportunity as we look at, both the ACE building and 5 Common to really just sort of right size what we think our needs are from a space perspective, do so holistically and kind of come up with a solution that allows us to kind of leverage the properties that we do have as effectively as possible. And if that does mean that we make some decisions to, sell certain properties or whatever, if that's part of the financing of making sure that we can use these buildings, it feels like that's the right conversation to have, just to make sure that we're being thoughtful and strategic and kind of prudent with the assets that we're entrusted with from a town perspective.
Any other comments on the ACE building before we move on to another piece of property?
Sure, I'm trying to understand what the costs of carrying a group of rooms that isn't really being used, and now, granted, you're saying you want to use them, but our costs of carrying them are decidedly less than our actual dollar costs of renovating them and building them out. So that, I think, that's where I'm struck a little, that I'm more like, you can invest in them when you have a really good use for them, but it doesn't sound like, if we've got one building at half capacity and then this upstairs space at another, and we're not putting offices in the senior center, and we don't have the people. It's not like we've hired a bunch of people. It's not like we're squeezed for space. So why are we worried about like the costs of carrying these empty spaces? There are no costs for carrying these empty spaces. There are costs for doing everything else.
I don't think that it's no cost.
Well, it's
I mean,
pretty
we're
relative.
We're heating and maintaining, both buildings that again are at kind of lower capacity. I mean, anytime you can kind of get to a place where you're heating or maintaining one building as opposed to 2, if you're talking about the same space, I think it's more efficient.
Oh, so you're talking about selling 5 Common.
I think there's a lot of discussion that we need to have around this, but I don't think that I would start from the standpoint that, kind of maintaining the status quo is necessarily the best option. I think we should cost out a number of different scenarios, talk about sort of what our space needs are holistically from a town perspective, and build a cohesive plan from there.
Are you good, Councilor Butler?
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else on the ACE at the moment? Seeing none, why don't we, Bill, then turn to Butler Ave? Would that be a good transition?
Yeah, I had a couple of plans in there. Do you have those by any chance, or no, we don't? Okay.
They do have it in their package.
They got it in the package, okay.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'll talk to your package, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give my history of this.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I started harping on this project a bit. Noticed that we had an LSP, a licensed site professional, who wasn't making a lot of progress. Bugged these gentlemen here about it. Whether that changed anything or not, I will not say, but we certainly now have Weston and Sampson on the project.
Yep.
It's taken time because there is remediation needing to be done over there before anything else is done. The capped area will probably never be built on what is going to be remediated. There may be some acreage left over after that. Mr. Renault has been to the Conservation Commission, and I'll let him pick it up.
Yeah, so we brought on our new LSP back in October last year. So over the last year or so, we've worked through our environmental permits. So we've had 3 filings with the DEP regarding the contamination component. So we have our what they call a phase 1 comprehensive site assessment. That basically is us doing all of our testing, reporting and what we find for testing. Then fast forward, we continued testing through July. In July, we submitted 2 plans, a phase 3 remedial action plan. So that looks at alternatives of how we can clean this up or cap or whatever we were looking. We really focused on 2 alternatives. One that really wasn't a feasible one, which would be removing all of the asbestos impacted soil and the fill that's there, which obviously is not something that we would want to do. That's tens of millions of dollars. And then a capping of the landfill area where that was all placed. That was something that Steve, myself, Tom Mullen, and our previous LSP had talked to DEP about. Steve, I want to say back in 2018. I mean, I had just started here.
Before COVID.
Before COVID, I had just started here. Probably was my first meeting with you, I think. So it goes way, 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 way back. So they basically told us at that point that they'd allow us to let the soil stay. But the only way it could stay is if that area would be considered passive recreation. So that's no buildings, no building on it. So we've kind of advanced that as our preferred plan. We also provided them in July what is called a remedy action plan. So that basically outlines how the capping would happen and the improvements that we would see based on the testing that was done. So
and Bill, the capping is approximately 5 or 6 acres of the 11 that we have, or
yeah,
could you give me the specs on that? Just
yeah, because we do have wetland. Yeah, but that's probably a good number, somewhere around, let's say 4 acres, 5 acres or so. We still have another 4 acres to 5 acres of developable land above that could potentially be used for something else. So before I get into the developable part, let's stay on the capping section. So capping section, we also went to the Conservation Commission. So my team worked with the Conservation Commission, our old conservation agent, new conservation agent, came to a consensus plan, which is, essentially, unfortunately, there's a lot of trees that have grown over the years since this, since the event happened to put all the soil there. To cap it, we would need to remove the majority of the trees there. We've highlighted a handful that we could keep. So we need to do sort of like a reforestation type plan and kind of a mitigation package. So working with them, we came up with a wildflower meadow, a small little path, a bunch of trees that would be replanted and understory plantings as well. So we think we're comfortable with where we're at. That was approved last Tuesday. We've received our order of conditions. Well, they voted on the order of conditions last Tuesday. It goes through an appeal at DEP. They may have some additional comments and want to look at it again. But at this point, we're looking at moving forward with our contractor and finalizing the last submittal, which is what they call a non-traditional work plan. Our contractor works with an asbestos abatement contractor as well, and our LSP. That team files essentially how the work will proceed to cap, and that's something that we're looking to move forward with as soon as possible. I'm working with him now on pricing and seeing where that lands. If you recall, we had a environmental insurance policy back in the day when the land was taken at town meeting many moons ago. And so we've spent some of that obviously on the engineering work, but the remainder would be for the capping. So we'll see where we land with that.
Do you think we have enough insurance coverage to cover the capping?
From what my contractors tell me, we're pretty close. So right there.
Did you, the reforestation, is that on the capped area, or is that taking away part of the other
No,
land?
capped area, all capped area. Yeah,
All capped area.
so unfortunately, in order to cap it, there's kind of like a slope that goes down to the wetland. If you think about how you'd cap it, I mean, there's no way for me to cap it without filling the wetland, so I have to remove at least the thickness of the cap to be able to put the cap back. So that essentially wipes out all the trees. There's just no way to construct it another way. So,
Yeah.
So we did
Is there a time delay for the DEP to do its review before
They
you
have a
can move
30-day
forward?
appeal process, yeah. So we're in that now. So we'll see where that lands. They did provide some comments previously. They know it's happening. So they didn't have the phase 2. When I filed it, I was trying to do all of this concurrently. They provided some comments, said they really want to make sure we go through the phase 2, 3, and 4 before they see anything here. We're working on the non-traditional work plan, so they may appeal it, but ultimately, I think all of it would just resolve at the same time once we get the non-traditional work plan. So, my goal
If the
was
capping starts, when would it potentially be completed by, the remediation?
this is months worth of work. It's not a huge heavy lift, to be honest with you. So it's a lot of earthwork, but besides that, I mean, a couple of months. It's to move some dirt around and cap it all up. So and then the plantings obviously would have to happen spring at the earliest. So if we're able to pull all of our ducks in a row, get approvals say by December, I'd be in I'd be in construction right away, and then they go over the winter. As much as they can, which would be good for us, and then we'd be planting in the spring. Otherwise, we'd be looking at spring construction, depending if we have to jump through a few more hoops at the DEP land, and we'll get there and going by next year.
Mm-hmm. Questions from the counselors, if we can divide this up into the remediation portion and then the maybe buildable portion. Counselor Carney?
How do they cap it?
So it's a system with a geotextile. So geotextile goes over the cap material, the impacted material, and then we have an 18-inch. Essentially, it's a cap of a foot of just clean gravel, and then 6 inches of loam on top, and that would be the planting media for the wildflower meadow that we were asked to do through the council. Through the commission, conservation commission. And then we have some planting areas where we kind of mound that 6 inches up for planting material for some bushes and understory plantings, and then eventually the trees. But they were pretty amenable to using saplings too, so that saves us a good chunk of dough. So I'm not bringing in 40 trees. I'm doing a bunch of saplings that will take. It takes a lot longer for them to grow, but ultimately, it saves us a bunch of money. We can buy those things, kind of like if you remember the Arbor Day that they hand out those little guys. So that's kind of what we would be putting in there, and kind of making sure that they, that they take and monitoring those over a period of time.
How confident are you and your engineers and the LSP? How confident are you that none of the other properties that start digging into are not going to expose further contamination?
Say it again, just to make sure I understand you.
You've got an area where you say is buildable that you're not going to cap.
Yep.
Now, how confident are you that there's nothing under there that?
So we have a couple of small hotspots based on what was being done on the property. So they had like some oil stuff that's an easy fix, and then some other material that was placed in a mound. But aside from that, the rest of that's all clean. They did a bunch of testing, and if you look at the site the way it lays out, you can honestly see just by looking at it. There's a ledge face that's coming down, and essentially they just took what was the wetland at some point and filled that in with material and kind of created this flat section, and then it ties down. So, just visually looking at the topography, you can tell where it was. And so up top, we have a couple of things that need to be cleaned as well. As part of the remediation work, I'd look to probably have the house abated. All that would all be done at the same time. Just get everything done at once.
Thank you.
The house is a tear down, basically.
Yeah. I'm assuming that the council will be on board with that. So, but I'll be coming back with that plan in the future.
Yeah. Any other questions on the remediation? Councilor Vincent?
Thank you, Chair McLean. Thank you, Bill, for your presentation. From the road, where would be the capped acres versus the potential development acres?
Okay, so where the house is, that's the developable section. So that upper section, that's where things could potentially be developed. Down below, so there's a little driveway with some big, large granite stones. That's the beginning of where the cap area would be. And then it goes up essentially a little bit into the hill, but there's a big ledge face that comes down. Kind of think of us abutting up to that ledge face. That's what we're doing.
And would I be correct to assume that the capping would need to be completed before any potential development could be evaluated?
Yeah, there's a few things that would have to happen. So we would have to look at a couple of spots. So with the passive recreation requirement, we would have a conservation restriction that would be placed there. The commission was worked with us pretty well on that, so we have a couple of different options. So we may subdivide it off and provide it to them as a standalone, which might help us with the development, or we may do it as a conservation restriction. So we'll be working through those details on what's better for the town, and I'll be coming back to you folks with some recommendations on that. Obviously, we have town properties that would be impacted, so we'd be back to a town meeting just to have that easement or subdivision happen. Although I don't know, Steve, if the subdivision, would that still require town meeting approval?
The sale of the land
the sale of the land will.
Well, yeah.
Yep, yep, so we probably roll it all into at least one meeting and get all of that vetted out. But that's really what I'm gonna be working on up to next town meeting, to try to have hopefully all this stuff squared away and moving in a tight bow and presenting it at town meeting.
And as you move forward with looking at any potential development, as the capping gets done, you would go before the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees and discuss that with them as well?
Yeah, I think I'd be starting here first, actually.
Yeah.
So what I'm envisioning, Mr. Chair, do you want me to jump into the development part now? Is that, or do
well,
you want to?
Let's see whether we have any remediation-based questions, if you don't mind, Counselor Vincent, before we get into the development. I thought I saw Counselor Butler, perhaps.
No, I was trying to remember, is this the property that we had the big settlement with a couple of years back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all I was trying to recollect what this
Okay. Yeah. Well,
debacle was.
why don't we move to the next side of the other side of the street?
The other side of the coin.
The
as
other
they
side
say.
of the
Yeah,
coin.
there we go. So, so I mean, basically what we're looking at is we have about 3.8 acres up the top, so about little around 4, and that depends on where our, our subdivision line or our conservation restriction line ends up. Ultimately, that's kind of split into 2 spots, so you have kind of much higher grades where the house is, as I'm sure you can tell when you're on Butler Ave, and then coming in from the backside, from the subdivision in the back, there's like essentially 2 knolls that sit together, and then there's a big kind of trough in the middle, if you want to, just to make it easy to understand. So, when I was talking earlier about, potentially, the cost to do that, we really have to do a cost-benefit analysis on the filling that would happen, because we'd be looking at 20, 30 feet worth of fill to build that, to try to, potentially use a smaller section of it. So my game plan was to kind of look at a bunch of different options and bring those back to say, okay, here's if we decide to fill that area or not fill it, and then essentially come up with 3, kind of development styles. One would be sort of a kind of a townhouse type of thing, whether it's, duplexes, quadplexes, or something like that. Another one would be kind of a cottage style development, smaller little homes that could be used and sold off individually. And then another one would be, potentially a garden style to maximize. So you'll have all of those as options in front of you folks to decide. I have my own personal opinions on them, but, that's what we would be looking to do. Once I had a better handle on what direction you folks wanted to go, I'd come back with a separate iteration where we'd look at, the kind of more of the nitty gritty of what we think we can get there. And then we'd be looking at, potentially the sell-off and bringing in the partners. But in the meantime, I'll be talking with Habitat for Humanity, another nonprofit, to look at options and what scale that they'd be interested in, just to kind of get there. I'm working with Sam on this too. So Sam Elliott, our town planner, she's done some of these cottage-style developments, which is great. So we'll be talking about that. I had to do one, actually develop it. I approved one when I was in Concord as well. So, I have some experience there. And then obviously in my development days, I did a bunch of townhouses and garden style apartments in my previous career. So I'll give you kind of some conceptual sketches, I think, and start with that. We had a sell-off project that we did in Concord too that had some duplexes and affordable components to it that we kind of built in the sell-off. So depending on where you folks want to land on affordability, age restricted, accessible housing, which I think would be great. I know the Disability Commission would really like to see that. So I'll put the plug in for that. There's a lot of options of what we can do here. We don't have a ton of room though, just keep in mind, 4 acres isn't a huge amount, but we still can get something in there for sure that, will look harmonious with the neighborhood, or something larger if that's what we're looking to do. So it's all up to this board to give me some direction. And I'm thinking probably if it's not late December, early January, we'll have some sketches to start talking about and figure out where we want to go.
Are you actually thinking that you could get this, we could go get this decided into town meeting spring of 25? Is that?
We may want to, I think what we would look at least is for the selling off of the parcel. So we have that moved, and then I would have to at least have the easement done for, or subdivision for the restricted portion. Those
Right.
would be the keys that would have to happen.
Because we all know there's got to be a lot of public, outreach on
Sure.
any project like this.
Definitely.
I've always been behind the scenes advocating for combination of disabled and or senior and or 100% moderate.
Yep.
you know, which maybe you can and maybe you cannot do depending upon trying to make the numbers work. So, you know, it's something that the council will have to consider. I'm not a big fan of the third option there. Be nicer to. You know,
I think I'm with you on that, but.
yeah, you know.
I don't see that getting a lot of traction, so.
Yeah, and also, you know, we have to be cognizant of the neighbors.
I think so.
And the neighborhood. That being said, any questions from counselors on this aspect of, not that we have anything concrete, we don't, but,
Right.
and that's why I want the public to understand too, we're just starting this process in a way. It may have been going on for years and years and years.
Sure.
But I've heard things like there's a rush to this and there's a rush to build. There isn't.
Yeah.
We're going through a process.
Yeah, I've received some comments, similar comments.
Yeah, and
Mr.
this,
Chair.
this council will have all kinds of input. So it may be some of us won't even be here when these decisions are made. And there will be a lot of public outreach as well. We're doing everything as transparently as possible. Any questions from the counselors?
I think the other key thing is that we needed to know what we were dealing with the capped area.
Yeah.
Exactly, before we
Yes.
could even
Yeah.
move forward. So
Right,
that's
Yeah,
kind of step one.
I've told people that have questioned this, we you know, we haven't even done the remediation yet.
Right.
You know.
That's why my second question was, assuming that the capping needs to be completed before any potential development can be evaluated. Because
You would
we
assume
definitely
that.
have to make sure that we complete that first.
First thing we have to
Right.
get done. Yeah, we gotta box that up, and yeah, that's the first piece we do.
Yeah, I didn't cut you off there, did I, Councilor Vincent? Did you have further
No,
discussion on this?
Thank you, Bill, for your presentation.
no problem.
And answering my questions. I don't have anything
Okay.
further.
I'm not seeing hands, so maybe we can talk about the herd building.
I don't have much on this one.
I'll
That's-
take
that's-
the
I think it was
herd.
Mr. Mayo.
So we've talked about the herd with the Affordable Housing Trust Group. We actually had a little tour, bring me back down memory lane there. But that's basically all we've done, working with the MBTA Communities Act and some other things. I think whatever this council wants to do with herd, I think that we would want to have plenty of public input. The last time we had public hearings was, I want to think 2015.
19.
What? Was it 19?
I think that was the last one.
It was earlier than that. It was like
You had it over the
15,
period of
2015, and at that time, I will tell you that I intentionally dragged my feet because I didn't know whether I would need it for swing space as the schools were being built, whether it was the Galvin or the public safety building, which we actually did use it for swing space during that time. It is a good-looking building. At that time, the consensus in the neighborhood, and I'm not saying everybody, was the consensus for housing in its existing footprint. Kind of an a la Franklin School kind of thing that we did in Franklin. But I envision us, if the council wishes, starting up again in, you know, after town meeting, probably not till January, because I think nobody wants to come to any neighborhood meetings probably in December. And kind of get some ideas and see what's going on there. And I think that's part of the puzzle. When you look at herd, when you look at, you know, potential, if there's potential monies to be got there, how does that affect what happens not only in that building, if anything, what happens at Butler Ave, what happens with 5 Common, what happens with ACE. So I think looking at, and Civic Center, looking at all of those holistically and doing a spreadsheet and seeing where do we come from there. Some people think that we should have a town hall annex or a town hall at the Herd School. So I think we'll look at those things as well. Needs a lot of work. Herd needs a lot of work, a lot of lead paint, but beautiful classrooms, as I recall, being a student.
Did I see a hand, Councilor Dombrowski?
Yes, like on that, I do think if we pursue the idea of looking creatively at that, could we not transform that into town hall and then think about how we treat the town hall property, which is obviously valuable real estate, geographically where it is? I mean, it seems like Hurd has a good amount of parking
It
there.
doesn't. It's
In
actually
the back?
that's a pretty small parking lot compared to what we have today in Town Hall that fills up. Right, Steve, would you agree?
It is, the way it's sloped and it's not that big of an area, really,
Yeah,
the parking area there.
I think the parking really restricts part of what you're gonna decide on it, personally. just in myself looking at it, but there are,
But it's something to look at.
It's definitely something to think about. It could be.
Because I'm thinking
offices.
about that lot feels like it's a
You're
decent
talking about
size.
Common Street, not the town hall.
No, he's talking about town, he's talking
You're
about,
a place in
Herd
the
Square.
town hall.
Correct,
No,
yeah.
It's not even close enough.
Oh, the square footage isn't there, and I mean, if it's like an annex though, like Steve was saying, that might be an option.
Yeah.
For parts of it. I mean, I think there's also other things that you could do, talking about the accessible housing. They do communal sections where folks all live with their own rooms, but yet they have a common space and folks to support, so there's ways to do that type of stuff. That would be a really good fit potentially for that.
Those are some things that
What is
housing
the square,
costs.
what's the square footage though of Herd in its current footprint versus Town Hall?
Oh, I wish I had brought that. I'll have to get it to you. I'm sorry. I didn't bring
No,
it. It's smaller. I think it's smaller.
it might be around the same size if you include that extra house,
That-
like the,
Oh, if you include
the attached.
the auditorium.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, is that what it is?
Yeah.
It's an auditorium.
Because the park, I mean, the parking at the Herd never seemed to me to be very particularly small. I
Well,
mean,
if
It
you
doesn't
think
seem
about it,
small because you don't ever really see stuff in it when you see
Yeah.
the trucks and whatnot. But more importantly, you're never, I mean, not to be, there's never a town hall, like that's not a place where you would put a town hall. Like it's off the beaten path for everyone. It's just not like, think of any town anywhere. They don't have town halls in like random residential neighborhoods. So like, I don't think it could be the official town hall. It could be an annex of some sort. It could be redone into something else, but it, I don't think it could ever become like a centerpiece building for the town because it's just not in a spot that would call for that.
well, I think we also have to think about, and perhaps we have to re-envision what a 21st century town hall looks like. For instance, like we have all of DPW in town hall. If we had a new DPW facility, would DPW not be better relocated at that facility, for instance? You know, I think there's a lot more that's being done online now, even from like a tax collection standpoint. You know, I mean, I just think this idea of, oh, this is what we have in town hall. That's what we currently have because that's how it's been. So that's why we do it.
I don't disagree. I mean, I'm currently building one up in Middleton. I'm the chair of the building committee there, so I'm doing a town hall. So
Yeah.
definitely have some pretty good handle on size-wise. But I mean, it's a tight spot. I mean, I don't think you'd be able to necessarily reuse the building if we're adamant about doing something like, municipal there. I would think that you'd need to use that first floor for parking and have to go above it, like almost like we do with a lot of the garden-style apartment developments that you see around, like where you need that extra parking because it's small. We were using it for staging as we were doing all the construction around there, and there's just not a lot of room in that back area. I was surprised. Let's put it that way. I thought we had a lot more room, and once I was out there for a couple of things that I had to go visit, I was
I
surprised.
think in
with
that
how
back lot, once you put in aisle widths
Yep.
for circulation, you'd see that very few
spaces can happen.
spaces.
Yeah.
Well, I guess when we're talking about the idea of like having like an overflow for town hall, I'm like, do we really need an overflow for town hall? You know, can we not redesign even current town hall so that we have only necessary functions in that town hall? I don't think DPW needs to be in town hall. I think DPW is better with DPW, in one facility. That to me seems logical. A lot of other communities do it that way. So then we're talking about, okay, well, where can we put the health department? Perhaps then that you could put health department in town hall if you eliminate that. Like what are like the consumer facing,
I think
entities?
if you had a new DPW site, you probably would have the DPW function there too.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. Like,
Right.
we
Yeah,
have
we
the
would prefer
director
to
and,
be together.
other administrative,
You might not even have the
administrative
director
staff.
in town hall. You might have the director there as well.
Yeah, I mean,
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you have the director of the DPW not at the DPW facility and the administrative staff, not, it doesn't make sense, like how we have it now.
yeah, my
So
previous
they-
community, that's how it was configured. So we had we actually had two buildings on the same site
Uh-huh.
with water and sewer in one building, and then we
Yeah.
had administration and engineering in one, and highway all sharing one building.
Yeah.
So the goal would be to have, I think, all of Public Works in one building. I can tell you, I definitely can speak on behalf of Joe on that one, for sure. We'd all prefer to be under one roof.
But it just seems like we have to really kind of step back, and I mean, I know we've talked about master planning, like, I don't know that our master planning is ever really focused on these municipal buildings. That is obviously the beginning of a broader discussion, but let's prioritize. I mean, if the idea is ultimately to consolidate DPW, that's going to determine a lot of other, changes or create a different needs assessment for us in terms of how we use our current space. Then maybe 5 Common comes off as municipal space because we can reposition those folks into Town Hall in a new configuration. I mean, some of these conference rooms and things that we have in Town Hall, great. Do we need to have a big conference room on the first floor and on the second floor of Town Hall? Probably not if we have another location for conference room space. Is that in the ACE, for instance? There's just like so many different pieces that I feel like we're kind of talking about, but I think we need to figure out how we can have a more cohesive approach, and maybe part of that is first understanding, okay, in an ideal world, DPW's together. In an ideal world, we have this, and that, and so I feel like we're not there, so we're kind of dealing with each of these buildings in a vacuum, but ultimately, I think we have to first envision what town government, how that's going to function, and what the best way to establish, those functioning pods are, and then from there, look at what we have. And I feel like we're missing that piece of it.
Councilor Carney.
In response to what Ed was just saying, it would be very helpful, and we don't need this tomorrow, because this is future thinking, is to do a matrix of all of the town buildings, amount of parking there, square footage, accessible, all of the facets that describe that building, elevator, accessible space. That way, when we're talking about this, we're looking at a matrix because, my personal growing up, of course, you went to school there. I was a neighbor of mine. I was in Lincoln School, and I know that lot somewhat. Traveling down there, you couldn't fit the town employees parking in that parking lot.
No.
Never mind the public access. When you start splitting up Public Works and the rest of the town, you're talking about, okay, where am I going to go for my parking? When I go somewhere different for my parking permit, or I go somewhere different for my pit permit, then I go to the town clerk. What we have right now is something accessible to the public. And I don't disagree with you that some of the meeting rooms are not, really being used today. But if we go back to the old model, and people start meeting together instead of on the internet, which I think could be valuable at times, then we're going to need more meeting rooms, and give places for them to meet in person. And so that's my concerns. But I think, Ed, in answer to your question, I think we ought to get a matrix of everything, describing it, so when we sit down with the town engineer, we're looking at the same information. Because I'm just speaking out of my recollection, but I played basketball. I'm sure you did more than that parking lot.
They have the poles right in the middle of the
Yeah,
court.
and there's not much space.
But I mean, think about even like the Heritage Room. I mean, how often are we using that for meetings, for instance? That's a huge space. That's a huge meeting space. I think that's a very underutilized space. So I just think we have to think about our real estate in that context. Can we take a meeting room out of Town Hall, shift more meetings to the Heritage Room, for instance, and then create, offices there, potentially? Maybe that would make sense. I don't know, but I think these are all like discussions that are important to be had if we're talking about, this is great to hear this information, but I think we need to have like more of who are we trying to slot where,
Sure.
ideally.
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes to it too, just in doing the other project up north. I mean, you run into like, voter areas, right? So right now, that room's being used for voting, for early voting. That's something that happens cyclically, so that's gonna happen, you need that space. So there's a lot of other things that go into it, that's a good example of one that I didn't think of before I was doing that project. So, I don't disagree with the point, and, is it underutilized to some degree? Probably. But at some point, you actually need the room, though, to be able to do some of these other things that civically we need to do. So, just something to think about.
Did you have your hand up, Councilor Butt?
I did. I think Councilor Carney's suggestion about a matrix and it sounds great. And I kind of what I said earlier, Steve, is I'd love to pull in, Karen Burke and Dan McGrath, because they're the ones who know what the buildings are being used, and also when things come up that the clerk needs more space. So I think that'd be really great. I feel like we talk about these buildings, every couple of months, so to kind of talk about them all at once and what they're used for. And then I'm gonna use what Councilor Dombrowski said. I think ideally what we would like, and then I'm channeling our ex-colleague who's no longer here, but we should not be thinking of a utopian focused on parking. That is not what we are doing buildings and office space around. And Steve, as our town administrator, I'm looking at you, like that is not what we make decisions around. We need to think about staff and office space and how do we make things welcoming and who comes in person and who works from remote, but we are not making decisions based on parking because we can figure that out. So I'm challenging my former colleague a little bit there. And just a little thing, I worked at Telus Health Plan for 4 years. For employees, if you carpooled or if you biked there, if you walked there, they gave you an incentive. Something to think about with your employees, Steve, right? Something to think about. If parking is really an issue, how do you incentivize it? But Tufts used to do it, that if you decided to carpool, you got money back.
I want to step in for one moment, if you don't mind, Councilor Vincent.
Sure.
Two things. One is that I picked up books in the Hurd parking lot. It is much smaller than Town Hall parking. Trust me on that one, but we can go out and measure. We'll get your roller and go out there and measure like we did on North Ave. The second thing, which I think is fairly obvious, and I don't hear it, is if we're doing a matrix, whether you're in private or public settings nowadays, this 3/5 of non-facing public people, those are office share situations. Those are situations where we could have people working in the same desk when somebody else isn't sitting there. And that could compact some of these needs that we're talking about. Anyway, I wanted to put that out there.
Not that the state's doing it. My wife works for the T.
We're all being hoteled.
She has,
We're all being
basically
hoteled.
it's a hotel. That's exactly what it is.
We're being hoteled. Everybody is. Councilor Vincent, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair McLean. I can't see Russia from my house, but I can see the Hurd School from my house. So I just want to make sure everybody watching and the residents understand we're just brainstorming tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Discussions about possibilities. When I go out for a run tomorrow, I don't want a line of people outside my house saying that they heard that Town Hall was going to relocate to the Hurd School. So this is just brainstorming as we try to evaluate our way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Excellent point. Anything else on the Hurd School for tonight? Okay, seeing no hands. I did also want to ask you, since you are here, Mr. Renault, what the progress is on North Ave. It seems to me that, painting of lanes, whether we have the poles or not, painting of lanes and such could be going forward. So what's the holdup?
Contractor, paving contractor. So his current schedule has him in 2 weeks. He probably has about, I'm saying probably 5 days worth of work. Then he'd be moving into painting after that. So that puts us into middle of November or so. The poles have not shown up yet. I'm being told they are in transit. That's the best they can give me. So they told me they were expecting it last week. Maybe end of this week. That's what I was told before I came today. So that's what we said.
Sounds like one of my Christmas gifts that was routed to Fargo. But in any event, you are moving forward on the lanes themselves.
On the what?
The bike lanes.
Yeah, they would be painted
out. The buffer,
Yeah, so he's trying to coordinate that obviously with the work he's doing on Lowell as well. So he wants to come in and do.
How much more paving is really needed to be done on North? I thought we were pretty close on it.
It's the intersections on that whole run, and then he's redoing the trench from the water main that was done way back a few years ago. So we just want to go back in and we consider that to be a temporary patch in general. So we just want to come back a following year, at least after it's gone through one freeze-thaw cycle.
Okay, so these are limited pieces. It's not
these
the
are all
whole
limited pieces. Yeah, yeah. But it's a lot of handwork and smaller pieces, so he can't just blast it all out at once. So unfortunately.
Okay. Any other questions from the council on North? Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. And it looks like over at Fielding, the drainage system was put in. I know a couple months ago they had problems with water pooling, but now the drainage system has been put in there, and it looks like that alleviated that problem. Is that right?
That is the goal. We do them, but yes, we fix that.
Yeah, thank you for getting that
problem.
done.
Yeah, of course.
That's all I have, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Town Administrator, have I missed any properties? I mean, I know we own others, but...
Trying to find some more.
Well, we own a piece here and a piece there, but I think we've pretty much exhausted this menu item for the evening, unless anybody else has anything else they'd like to bring up. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Renault,
Thank
for
you, Bill.
coming in.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
for
me,
the
folks.
updates.
Great seeing you
Really
all.
appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Looking at item C, I believe I would entertain a motion.
Well, why
Yes?
don't I give a brief update,
Why
if
don't
you
you give a
mind?
brief
Okay, so,
update, Town Administrator?
I'm very,
I'm sorry, I'm moving too quickly.
you are.
trying
I hate to slow you down, believe me. Unfortunately, at the Springtown meeting, and I apologize for my voice this evening. Unfortunately, at the Springtown meeting, I had not been able to pull together the contract with the clerical union. As I said then, that I hoped to bring it back to the fall town meeting. I am happy to say that we do have something to put in front of the council and in front of the town with our clerical union of 23 members. This contract is a 3-year contract from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. Cost of living increases of 2.5% per annum each year on July 1st. And I will say that that is consistent with every other contract, union contract that I have put together in this last run. Some additional steps at the end at 1.75%. After step 4, all salary scales are also smoothed at 1.75%. There is one upgrade in the DPW department. Cost of the package is $67,035 in year 1, with $53,941 from tax levy, $6,119 from water, $6,975 from sewer, fiscal 25. I think this is a good and fair contract on par with all similar unions, and the members of this union are the ones that you really interact with, the public interacts with when they go to town hall. They're the ones that take care of you, answer your questions, and then come find their superiors and have them help them out if they need. So, good group, works really hard, and I'm pleased with this contract at the end of the day. Thank you. Ready for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from councilors? Councilor Butler?
The 67,000 increase, Steve?
Yes.
What is that as a percentage overall of the?
It is, because of the steps, it's less than 4%.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
just want to be sure that
Yeah.
like we're reconciling,
Yeah.
like that we're saying 2.5, but it's probably 375 with the with the steps or something like that. That's
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions, clarifications? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the clerical union contract as presented by the town administrator.
So moved.
Seconded.
We will do a roll call vote. Councilor Chines,
Yes.
Councilor Butler,
Yes.
Councilor Vincent,
Yes.
Councilor Butt,
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski,
Aye.
Councilor Carney,
Yes.
and Councilor McLean is a yes, so that's 7-0. Sherry, thank you very much for your work on that contract, Steve. Item D is regular town meeting warrant, November 16th, 2024, vote expected. We have the warrant printed in the materials. Hopefully people have had a chance to look it over. It's not 20 items, which is good.
Not 20 items.
We have the town report on there. We have the solar project on the Galvin on there. We have 40A plan that we have all discussed at, I believe, our previous meeting on there, and a couple of citizen-related items towards the latter part of the meeting. Any discussion or comment on the warrant from town councilors tonight? Councilor Carney.
I read that. I apologize for being late. I didn't get the notice of the early meeting. I just got in yesterday from traveling. I read the article. I think it's excellent. And the 48 article. The addresses listed in there, those are the only addresses that are?
No, I was going to bring that up. There are some more addresses to put in there. So I would ask for approval. We're going to go through and we're going to put, the problem is when we use the system in putting in the properties, for instance, if it was a condo complex, it took, maybe it's 11 Lake, let's say, but there are 30 units, all right? So we will, on the warrant, we will put 11 Lake, because that should let all of you know I'm 11 Lake, Unit 2, Unit 3. Everyone will get noticed, okay? But there was 248 Albion. We're double and tripling to make sure that, but there are, this list will increase. There are a few that we need to put on here. But it's not a huge amount.
No, I want to compliment
Yeah.
the committee because I think it's excellent. I just hope that when we advertise this, we don't, cut short on money, that we
Right.
we advertise these addresses exactly. Everybody's going to know. Nobody can say they didn't know. And that, to me, is the best benefit of this. And people are going to know up front. One thing at least I not discussed publicly, is the fact that in some of these cases, people are going to benefit from this. And nobody's ever talked about that. But in some of these cases, I know some of these properties that they might benefit from this, from being in the 48 district. So, people are going to have to make up their own decision. But I think, Mr. Chairman, you and the committee and Bob did a super job. I compliment you. It's really great that it came out this way.
The committee also wants to make sure that we're going to send out a postcard to every property owner in here as well. They're not going to get the full, this is too big to put on it, but it'll be a QR code or information where they can go and look at it.
Excellent.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Butt.
No, and Steve, that's really helpful. And who's working on the communications plan beyond just postcards? Like, I thought we were going to share that. I'm looking at the website. I don't see anything on the website yet.
Oh, no, I know. Well, first of all, so we do have a communication plan where we are going to, the addresses put us a little bit behind. But I will say that the first part of it was my show at WCAT. Was 80% of it was talking about this this project here. We will have info packets at Town Hall. We will have postcards going out, like I mentioned. We will have at least one more meeting of the 40A subcommittee. There will be a planning board meeting on 10/29, so that's next week. The planning board public hearing will be 11/13. So that'll be 2 bites at the apple there. We will have coffee hours at the senior center, at the civic center, and at town hall. Things will be pushed out on the web as we go, giving information to come to these things. The postcards are going out to the people that I talked about, that I just mentioned. There'll be a nice packet at town hall where, the zoning map is kind of, what does that tell you on this thing, right? But each individual character area, people will be able to come in if they want to town hall and get a paper copy of that. Or if you go into our whole thing on the website, you can pop up and look at those character areas which show everything on Foundry, everything on Tuttle Street, everything on Albion Street. So between that and a lot of us running around, I think it's a pretty good plan. Jen is looking at my show at WCAT. I told her to be very critical to see whether that's a video that could, be highlighted on its own. I think it's more just show the whole show, but we'll see what she thinks. She's smarter than I am in those things.
I think you had also indicated, Steve, we were going to publish more in the item than we.
Yes,
than
yeah,
has been in
the
the
addresses
past.
and the map does not need to be put in the item.
Why not?
State law does not require it.
But why? Why?
But I'm doing it. We're doing it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we are doing it.
Yeah.
We are doing it. No.
No, I'm trying to accentuate that we've been, we did get 852 surveys in the middle of the summer, more than we've ever gotten on any other project that I'm aware of. So people do know about it, maybe not everybody. Talk to your neighbors. Get people to come out and vote. I'm already doing it. Spread the word. Not everybody gets the item. Not everybody, is in the senior center or wherever we might have some materials. But I think this goes further than I've seen in the past. I think we're doing the best we can. You're never going to reach everybody in a 28,000 person town.
We'll be posting all the info packets and pushing that out. So this is pretty robust.
Is there a mechanism where this also hits some of the local community pages and so forth?
Well, I think that's when people share it, that's when it gets out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
I
okay.
think we're putting it on through our own channels.
For our own, yes, our
So
own.
that people can share the town's posts.
Right, yes.
Right.
Oh, yeah, on our own, yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And
Anything
when I
else?
walked in tonight, they were actually showing one of our last forums on WCAT.
Oh, okay.
So that's running.
Right,
around,
and as you mentioned, there are future meetings. I think ours, November 7th is already
Right.
posted. The planning board will be doing, its piece and also having a public forum, so we'll be attending those, I believe, as well, Steve.
Yes.
Are we attending both planning board meetings or the
I
public
plan-
forum?
I plan to.
Yeah.
I plan to, and
Yeah.
attend their meeting on the 29th, their public hearing forum, we talked about that earlier tonight, on the 13th.
Right, right.
We'll have the public info session, which will be the MBTA sub-meeting on the 7th. So that's 1, 2, 3 meetings in there, maybe we might squeeze in another, depending on what
Yeah.
you guys decide, so.
Yeah,
And the bylaw review committee is reviewing it as well. We had forwarded it to the bylaw review committee.
Do you know when they're reviewing it? I don't have that date.
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but it's,
but they
imminent.
have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're trying to hit all our bases and then some. Counselor Butler, was that enough? Counselor
that
Butler,
was,
were
that
you
was
done?
me not just
Yeah.
stretching. I think one of the things we need to make sure of is, in terms of your social media presence, your everything else, it is getting the never 40A people into getting them to understand what the implications of this are.
Yes. We are on our presentations, if it's okay, members of the committee, I can answer this, I think I can.
Please, please.
In our presentation, we're constantly updating that part of it, the implications of the list of grant opportunities through the state is ever growing. In where if you are not in compliance, you will not be able to receive it, including TIP projects are being looked at right now too.
Oh, I don't think these people are caring about the.
Well, I
they're
think
not caring
that's a
about the
big
stick,
money. It's a
but they're
big money.
caring about the carrot, and we really need to make sure it goes out to them that really this is very, very minimal impact on
Oh, yes.
development here.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
that's the thing is like I'm not worried about
I thought
like,
you wanted to know
people
about the money
people
part.
worrying about the money part. It's people worrying about like people were up in arms before, rightly so. The impact from adopting this is going to be very de minimis on any sort of housing plan that is being put forth, and that's the thing that people need to understand. And I'm not saying that that's what we wanted.
Yep.
I'm just saying that's what this is.
Yep, and I think it's important, the other messaging too, is there are people who voted for 40A last time, myself included, but others, who have come up to me as a counselor and said they don't like this proposal, they don't think it goes far enough. And so there is the other side to that. There are the people that are never 40A, and there are the people that think they're not coming to town meeting because they're not really excited about this, and they think it's a, what's the phrase that people are using? Jonathan, help me out. What are people saying? It's an
Rewarding bad behavior.
it's like a like it's following the rules with nothing else. It's like there's a phrase going around. So I think it's important. Like yes, we reach out to the people who were never 40A, but also know that there's contingency who really know we have a need for more housing in Greater Boston. And they like the proposals that we had last time.
And there will be people who are also in the crowd who were looking for a minimal compliance plan, who are more interested in this compromise plan because I know who they are. And we'll see how the vote comes out. Councilor Carney.
I made a point after the last town meeting, which was a rough one for me. But I looked at some of the addresses of the people who spoke for the larger area. Interesting enough, not many of them lived in it. I just want to make that point, the fact that it's easy to say that, okay, this area looks like it could use that, and we need more housing, but when you live in that area, that's why it's so important to me that I thought you gentlemen did a great job in the fact that, you know, you're showing the addresses, you're telling people who's being impacted so they can ask the relevant questions because they're being impacted. So I agree, there's people out there, honest people, who truly believe that we should be doing more for housing. I appreciate that. But the fact is that some of these people weren't thinking of the fact that, hey, it's not affecting my home. In fact, there's a statement in there of one of the persons who was involved with the whole final decision where they specifically said they didn't want Greenwood touched. Okay, quote unquote, I read it twice. Okay, so, you know, who was showing biases on that particular area? And I think you folks went out and you did the right thing. You found the areas where it might be helpful. Doug, I probably agree with you 100%, but the possibility is, I'm not sure some of these people aren't looking at some of these addresses. Some of them aren't going to be willing to say, geez, I'd like to take advantage of this and turn my 2-family into a 4-family.
Oh, yeah, no, it's a huge benefit for, like, some of the people here,
Yeah,
but there's very little, like, it's a benefit for some owners of
I trust you probably
properties,
know better
but-
than I, but I'm just saying that
Yeah.
some people could benefit.
Councilor Dombrowski.
I think if we could also be clear on one thing, this is not the only way that we can address the issue of housing in Wakefield. This is a state mandate that is being forced upon us, and we have significant potential consequences by noncompliance. That does not in any way mean that if people are concerned about housing in this community, that we can't, within our own community, make our own rules and create our own districts. And it falls upon the planning board and others, our town planner and others within our community to be able to craft something that is more appropriate for us. Not a one-size-fits-all that goes across, every community, 175 or 176 communities in Massachusetts, but a plan that works. So if people don't like the fact that this is a minimal compliance model, then I would encourage them to come up with other ways in which we can be creative and maintain our own municipal autonomy to make decisions that we think are best for us. Nothing is preventing that. Nothing has prevented that up to this point or beyond. So I feel it's a bit disingenuous to say, oh, 40A, we're following the spirit of 40A, but not the actual intent. Well, 40A just came about recently. Where was all this concern and where were all these ideas about how to create better zoning districts within our community within the confines of our ability to do so? So it doesn't ring, it seems odd that people would be so concerned about housing because we're not following a state one-size-fits-all model. But people are, up to this point, not out there vocally trying to offer suggestions and solutions that are specific to us. I don't understand that disconnect. It's perplexing to me. And this is not the end of the discussion, but I do think a discussion that keeps it local, that keeps it within our control, is what a lot of people feel is appropriate. And if there are a lot of different areas that we could look at development opportunities that are smart development, that are not going to change the character of our community, but also will address a need that some people have, and it's a legitimate concern that people have. So I don't think this is not it. 40A is not it. To me, it was never the right answer. It will never be the right answer, but we have the ability to do whatever we think is appropriate if it's the will of this community to do so. And I think that has gotten lost in all of this discussion.
Councilor Chines, I think, had his hand up first. Councilor Vincent. Councilor Chines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back, Mr. Mayo, to something I thought I heard you say. Are they looking at taking the TIP funding off the table for non-compliant communities? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, what we have recently heard is that, the TIP funding is a combination of federal funding and state funding. Normally, state funding makes up about 20% of a project. And two things are happening, and we're just this is changing. This is just picked up at a seminar that one of my staff was on the other day, where they talked about non-compliant communities um, would have a potential 5-point reduction in the grant application. And these applications are, 5 points could be a big difference. And there is some talk about in future projects that the 20% from the state would not be forthcoming if they were non-compliant. So if you looked at a $15 million project, 20%, that's $3 million that the community would have to come up on its own. So this is a moving target. It's every day there's a new area that they look at. They look at DESI, and we've talked about that before. It's right in their grant applications for DESI now for some of them. Must certify that you are MBTA compliant. It's an interesting dynamic.
No, I want to underscore, I mean, that's another area that we all should be concerned about. I mean, we've talked about TIP funding, and in fact, we're kind of on the TIP list for downtown revitalization. We're talking about, multi-millions of dollars from the state that could be at risk, and we're also talking about a downtown revitalization project that we've spent probably close to $1 million on planning and design for, and, to the extent that funding evaporates or is reduced significantly, that is money that is, that's money that we're not getting back. And so I'm sensitive to the fact that this is changing every day, but I hope as we think about the communication that whatever the current information we have gets put in, because I do think we need to be very, very clear, crystal clear, that the consequences to us of noncompliance can be quite significant from a financial standpoint, and ultimately then quite significant in terms of a quality of life issue in terms of what we're expecting for infrastructure improvements and so forth in town.
Councilor Chines, I would envision having these on the slides at the presentation, and not for fear mongering, but simply for fact, because these are factual things that we are seeing. If we're seeing something in print that says you must be in compliance, we're going to give that to the community so they understand that. We're not going to go out and guess as to what might be done in the future, but certainly we're going to let the town populace at town meeting know that this is the trend. This is the trend that the Commonwealth is going in. And we can't ignore that. We cannot ignore that reality. Anything else, Councilor Chines?
No, if we have nothing else, I would just make a motion to approve
I think
the town
Councilor
meeting
Vincent,
warrant.
if you don't mind, I think Councilor Vincent had his hand up.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councilor.
Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. The other thing I want to mention, Steve and I have actually been going through individually these DESI grants and identifying the ones that have the language in there that says, if you're not MBTA 48 compliant, you're not eligible for this grant. And we plan to have that up at town meeting so people can see the exact language. If the language wasn't in there, we don't put it on the list. If the language is in there, we put it on the list. And I personally have been looking at those DESI grants just to augment what Steve and the staff are doing in terms of trying to look at, because it's kind of overwhelming, because every day the Commonwealth is adding more potential grants on the list if you aren't compliant. The one thing I did want to say is I don't necessarily agree, and I'll articulate this at town meeting, that this is a compromise. I actually think this town has made considerable strides in affordable housing. And I'll give you something I was going to mention in announcements, but I'll mention it now. Right off the press today, EOHLC gave us the updated list of our subsidized housing inventory list. And for the first time probably ever, we are over 9%. We are at 9.13% on our way to 10. To give you a perspective, back in 2014, when we had the housing production plan, it listed in there that we were at 6%. In 2015, Mr. Mayo doesn't get enough credit for this, but he was the proponent of a inclusionary zoning bylaw change that was made at 2015. That spearheaded this effort to get us from 6% 10 years ago to 9% now. Of particular interest to me is back in September of 2022, we were at 7.06%, and in 2 years we've gone to 9.13%. Our standardized housing inventory numbers in September of 2022 were 738. As of today, they're 1,028. That's an increase of 290. So I totally agree that we need more housing, but I see a picture where we've done a lot more housing. And I look at this 48 proposal as something that augments what the town has been doing over the last decade. I also will note that the vast, vast majority of these numbers I just cited were based on the inclusionary zoning. They were not based on 40Bs. They're based on inclusionary zoning where the town had a prominent role in the development of these houses over the last decade. So I see this plan as something that augments. It also gives us the requisite degree of control over housing. You guys have heard me say this before. We had a housing production plan. It expired in February of 2020. It could have been renewed for an additional 5 years, and the town could have certified it so that the ZBA could have pushed back on 40Bs for up to 2 years or 1 year. I'll close with this. Our numbers is 57 in order for us to certify a housing production plan for 0.5% is 57, and that would allow the ZBA to push back on 40Bs for 1 year. Our number is 114, or 1%, allowing the ZBA to push back on 40Bs for 2 years. The number I just gave you is over the last 2 years, we've increased by 290 on our subsidized housing inventory list. Since we don't have the degree of control over 40Bs right now, I never was a proponent of going beyond the minimum compliant on 40A. We need to have control of our housing. We've done a masterful job on it, and this plan, once again, augments what we have done over the last decade. Thank you, Chair McLean.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Dombrowski?
I would just add to that, that in 2015, our population was right around 25,000. With that percentage, the percentage read off from 22 is at a population of over 27,000. So from a percentage, in proportion to population, that's actually even more significant.
That's true.
And I would add to that that this proposal is the only proposal to date that does at least provide for some affordable housing possibilities, some 10% possibilities on SHI units. None of the three that failed did that. I think it's clear to me that the biggest mover of growth in this town has been the special permits. The second biggest is probably 40B. Now that hasn't reduced prices at all, and I think that this compromise plan, as Councilor Butler said, is probably going to have a minimal impact compared to both of those other more driving forces. But that being said, I can't even see Councilor Chines. Is he okay, Sherry?
Yeah.
I'm good, yep.
Okay. In which case, I don't see any further comment. Yes, sir. One more.
Just in relation to the last three sort of comments, the question I always have around this for our subsidized housing inventory, that is, but we have something where if we develop and we do 10 units and 30% of them are, what's the percentage that they all count?
Well, it's our inclusionary zoning is 18%.
Right, but for 40B, I think the question was.
But for 40B, if it is a 40B project and they are rentals, they all count in the building.
Right, but what percentage of the 40B has to be?
Is it 25? Steve?
Oh, 25%.
Yeah.
25. Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
this also, I hate that I don't want us to be disingenuous. We're going to get to this 10% threshold. That doesn't mean that there's 10% in affordable housing in Wakefield. It just means 10% gets to count. Let's not have this myth that this dramatically increased housing, if it's 25 or 22% or 18, you're not getting, for every 100 units that you're saying of affordable housing, you're only adding 25.
That's a valid point. And
Yeah.
as I've said many times, keep in mind that after the next census, all of the units that go into the denominator get dumped into the denominator. So we may be at 10% in 2027. Although, as you say, it's not a true 10%, but it's 10% that counts.
It's 10% that meets the threshold.
But sometime around
meets the criteria.
2032, those numbers change again, because all of the units that we've been counting lately have been the SHI units, not the other units. So if we're counting 50 from the lake or 45 from the lake, there's another 400 just sitting there waiting for the next census to come into that denominator. So it's ongoing whacking of the mole. It's an ongoing process that we should be concerned and worried about.
Oh, none of the 400 are going to count? None of the 400?
No, 40-something, I think, of the 400 some. What's our count over at 18% over at the lake?
Oh, at 200 Corner Power?
Yeah.
I think it's 73.
73. So we
73.
get 73, but remember, we're not yet counting the rest of them into the denominator
Oh, okay.
until the
I gotcha.
2030 census, which can take a year or two before anybody seems to
Right.
know what it says. Anyway, if we have nothing further on that,
If I could ask on the motion of
yes.
of approving the town warrant with the ability of or my office to make sure that the address list is correct. So you're not gonna have a meeting before this needs to be posted, in other words, so I need a little bit of leeway on that.
So I would move that we approve the regular town meeting warrants of November 16th, 2024, as presented with the additional authorization for the town administrator to add additional addresses relative to the 40A article.
Second.
Motion seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Aye.
Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And I am yes. Sherry, that's 7-0. Motion passes. Next is E, we have succession planning update. I think the town administrator can probably kick us off with that one.
Yes, very quickly, and thank you to the town council and the finance committee and ultimately the taxpayers at town meeting. At our spring town meeting, we were able to add $100,000 in the budget, really to kind of plan for the future in the accounting department. I've said over the years that the hardest position to fill is the town accountant. Because of some other changes in personnel, 100,000 would certainly get us through this year. And we have gone out and have advertised, and we probably have 15 plus applications for a town accountant's position. And actually, at least 2 of them are excellent, experienced in municipal government as town accountants, both of which have in the past worked for communities that I know the administration very well in. So it's and actually one of the people I've worked with in the past. So I'm very happy about that. It's a hard position to fill, particularly where our neighbor to, what is Linfield, to the north? Did we say to the north Linfield is? To the north is advertising for a similar position, and it's about advertising 10% more, so I have to have per year. So I got to have a conversation with Mr. Dolan about how he's doing that. So I'm very happy that's a key succession planning to look at, and you know, we really lean on, or I really lean on our town accountant a lot. Kevin is really more of a chief financial officer than a you know, typical town accountant that doesn't get involved in these things. So we're looking for someone who in the future, not right away, obviously, can kind of grow into that position and learn and going forward. So to me, that was a very important position to look at, and I'll give you an update as the process continues.
You intend to be interviewing soon?
Yes, oh yeah, yeah, we're setting them up, yeah.
Questions from town councilors? And Sherry, you'll have to tell me if Jonathan Chines has his hand up, because I don't see him anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
Not that I could see him,
Yet, no.
I couldn't see him before. Okay. And this, Steve, is just part of the situation, right? I mean, you're looking to hire, it sounds like from the experience level anyway, you may have a pool of candidates that could actually be successors.
Yes,
Possibly. be
possibly, yeah.
Successors. We're not hiring anybody today, you know,
Yeah.
not taking any position on that, but,
Yeah.
you know, you've got a pretty experienced pool coming in.
Yeah.
Councilor Butler. Well, 2 things. One, you got 15 resumes. It doesn't sound like it's that hard to fill. And I think, you know, finding the the next town accountant. How are you advertising? Is this like assistant town accountant, or is this?
No, it says town accountant.
It's town accountant, and
Yeah.
then it's presumably then Kevin moves into the newly created
Correct.
assistant town manager or whatever,
Chief
CFO,
FO,
whatever,
CFO,
whatever we're describing it as. I guess I'm a little concerned around that, just not so much about Kevin moving into the CFO role. Kevin's fantastic. You're hiring the accountant, and that's great. You find that person. But the problem I have is, what are we doing if, because it sounded like last year you guys said had sort of the same timeline for both of you and Kevin going in potentially in 26 or no later than. I'm trying to understand if we have two people, the town administrator and the assistant town, who do we hire into like fit into that next role, or do we lose both of you and then we've got to like go whole hog? This doesn't seem like great succession planning to me.
Well, I think it gives you some time. Yeah.
But given that probably Kevin won't be either interested or eligible to, like, we're hiring Kevin as assistant town administrator essentially, but he won't be eligible for your job. Or, I mean, maybe he would be, but
I mean, who knows what could happen to me tomorrow?
I'm just saying, like, right, but it's more
Yeah.
the premise is we've got to look at it and like this is probably not the way I would think about structuring succession, or are we hiring? We're essentially planning to we're having this additional position, so we're replacing 2 positions longer term with 3, right? That's the plan. Is that assistant town administrator or CFO is something that exists in other towns?
I think you would find that most communities of our size have that, but I think that would be up to the council when they hire and what goes on then. You have actually an opportunity to do whatever.
Well, we've created the assistant town administrator position, right? Or have we not yet?
I think in short term, yeah, the CFO sort of thing, yes.
Yeah. So we've got that. So we have 3. We're adding a town accountant. I guess that's the thing is, all right, then what is the next hire? What does the next hire look like? Is there somebody who shadows you for 6 months? Like we're thinking about with Kevin. Like that's trying to understand what next
that
we
normally
do.
doesn't happen, but I think
Yeah.
that's a discussion we'll have to have probably at a longer period.
Okay.
I'm going to hit Counselor Chines over here. I see a hand.
Ooh, his hand came in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Steve, for the update. And I am glad to see that we've gotten 15 applicants. 15 applicants isn't always 15 quality applicants, but at least it does sound like we've got a few really strong ones in there. I look at this as sort of being I look at this as being kind of an opportunity to address 2 issues. And I think, Steve, you hit on one of them, which is that we are very unique among communities of our size in not having an assistant town administrator. And kind of regardless of the names of who's in what position over the long term or short term, I do think that is a gap that we talked about when we proposed adding to the budget last year, and I do think that that's a gap that we need to fill. So from that perspective, I think part of the goal of doing this is to make sure that we do have basically a position in place that allows us to build some capacity at Town Hall, regardless of, again, kind of who's filling which role in any particular time. I don't know, obviously, what your timeline is or Mr. Gill's timeline is, and I don't want to speculate about that in a meeting, but I do think that, depending on how those timelines work out, this could have a double opportunity both to build a succession plan for the town accountant, which we're doing by hiring someone now, and also potentially to kind of bring someone in at an assistant level if the timing works out that, could be shadowing you for 6 months. It may not work out that way time-wise, and certainly when I look at other communities, I don't think it has worked out that way for the most part. You see a lot of communities that are recruiting new town administrators really from the outside without having anyone in-house, and it could very well be that we end up at that place when the time comes, hopefully not for a very long time, Steve, but I think again, as we look at the multiple issues that we've been trying to address here, I think this is a good first step of, first of all, building some capacity, building some redundancy, building some talent, within the financial team. And secondly, making sure that we've got a position kind of developed for the long term, a role in town hall that does allow us to have that deputy that I do think that we so desperately need.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up question, Councilor Chines? You said you didn't want to speculate,
Sure.
but at our, I believe it was meeting last April, Kevin clearly said that he was going to stay no longer than June 30th, 2026. I'm just kind of curious as to where does the shadowing person fit into that scenario? As Councilor Butler said, it's possible that the town administrator and the town accountant may both leave around the same time. That is a theoretical and very, maybe not probable or maybe possible. It's certainly possible. So where does the shadow person come in terms of the financing?
Well, I think that's where I wouldn't want to speculate, because around is a relative term, and I don't want to hold Kevin to something that he said in a meeting a year ago or 6 months ago, whatever it was. But if there is a gap between his departure and Mr. Mayo's planned departure, I think that's the gap that we would target to potentially bring someone into the assistant role that could be a successor. The other risk is you bring someone in and it may not work out. And so, I don't think that we can plan succession perfectly, but I think what we're doing here is building some pieces in place where, we're building some capacity, we're bringing some talent in that, will help us make the right decisions in the long term. Obviously, there are a ton of variables that affect that, not least of which are, kind of personal decisions that, individuals have to make about, how long they want to keep working. And so I think, this represents to me, a good plan to address some of the needs that we know that we'll have without kind of over-investing in hiring a lot of new people, while at the same time recognizing that, there are a lot of things that could change between now and 2026.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, because town administrator's contract does run June 30th, but there is a possibility of a 6-month extension from June 30th, 26.
That's correct.
It is possible that the two gentlemen will leave on or around the same time. That's why I was, we can hope for a gap,
Yep.
but we really don't know. I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't speculating on Kevin. It's what he said when I, kind of sheepishly asked, and he volunteered that at our prior meeting.
Is that a player option or a team option?
On which one?
On extending 6 months, it's your decision, Mike.
That's how it's written.
Yes. It's not like we can extend you 6 months.
No.
I mean, I think it is technically a mutual decision.
All right, I think I saw two counselors. Counselor Carney?
Yeah, I honestly, I watched the May meeting and listened to the discussion, and you really didn't come to a conclusion, but you all had your own opinions. And I think personally it's dangerous, because I've gone through such a career path, and I've seen it happen in other communities. When town administrator is going to hire a very, very important position, and we're blessed to have Kevin around at least for another year and a half, 2 years, to train this person, because that is a key position in the town. He works totally independent to the town administrator. I was on the committee that picked Steve. In fact, I led the way on it, and it wasn't unanimous. Okay, what you're seeing now is the results of, I think, a good decision-making process. And we had candidates coming up. We had again, Tom Butler was still there. Tom didn't get involved with the decision-making. He didn't offer an opinion. And I think the reason Tom didn't do it is the fact that he knew that the political factions on the board might not agree with it. But here we are, a single council that's going to change in 6 months. Okay, 2 members are going to be gone. At least that's what I'm told. Okay, so you're going to have 2 new members. Okay, to kind of think ahead that you're going to pick a town administrator candidate trainee, without their consent, with any new member's consent, I think it's very, very dangerous. I don't think it's a big issue. There's a lot of candidates, Steve, that you've noticed. You've known people who moved. The mayor of Melrose moved to Linfield, very talented person. Okay, we can go out there and get some talent. We did last time. We had a town manager or town administrator from Swampscott who applied. And those were the two main competing people. But you had people who understood municipal government, who could lead, who knew how to work and to negotiate contracts. That's an important thing too. But I think that's for a council to make, because if we decide ahead of time on the decision, it really belongs to the next council, then you're going to cause some real political conflicts there. Okay, because some people may run for office just for the purpose they don't like. It was a 3-2 vote that got Steve appointed. Okay, and I bring that up only to standpoint that
5-2.
5-2. Was it 5? Okay, it was 7 on board. 5-2. And back to the fact that 2 years later, Steve had those other members feeding out of his hand because he accomplished what he had. We knew he could do it. So I think picking a town administrator is not the same process as Steve hiring someone to do Kevin's job. And I think it's a great idea, and I'm all in favor of whatever you want to call Kevin, Steve. That's fine with me. And giving Kevin a little bit of lift to help go through this transition. I think that's a great idea. But for us to be talking, this council, to be talking about Steve's replacement, I think is wrong. I think you could make it political. I think you could cause political issues at a town election, and you don't want to do that, okay? The honest process is when Steve decides he's going to give us enough time for him to help us, and I think that would be very beneficial after I've already been through this process once with Tommy Butler. The fact that if Steve helped us pick his successor, I think we'll be in good shape. And I think that's the better way of looking at it. Because I think you can really, I've seen towns get torn apart on this issue. The fact that a council's leaving office, appoints someone, and then new councils come in and they don't get along. So I think that's the process I'd like. As far as the assistant town administrator, well, how many years late now? 15 years late for you. I think the assistant town administrator should be hired by the next administrator. We think it's a good idea, but let him hire his person. So that way you don't have someone in competition. If you hire an assistant town administrator and you don't like the job he is and you're not going to promote him, he's not going to stick around. So you're wasting your time training someone. I think the process should be very, very simple right now. Let Steve hire his person to replace Kevin, and let's leave the town administrator issue till later on when Steve makes his final decision, and then the then town council, not us. I might not be in it. He might extend beyond the end of my term. So I think that's very, very important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. I guess I'm just a little confused because we're not hiring anybody. We're not to replace
There's no money to hire anybody.
not doing any of that today.
And we're not selling her at school either.
There's a lot of things we're not doing that we're talking about. But yeah, the succession planning, I wanted you guys to see it because the first discussion, because it has been on our agendas for quite some time. Whether we're premature in acting on it or not, I can't say. But I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to be involved in that decision. So, it's going to be some other people that are going to make that decision. Councilor Dombrowski?
I just have a lot of questions about this generally. One, it feels like we have this idea of like the next town accountant has become like such an outsized discussion. The worst case scenario, and don't get me wrong, I think Kevin Gill has done a great job certainly, and I do think that he has a lot of knowledge to impart upon whomever, he or she, whoever would take over. And I do think having that person go through a budget cycle would be helpful. But in the same respect, let's not kid ourselves. These are not tenured positions. And we could have them trained for a year and they could be poached by some other community. Similarly, if we ever found ourselves in a bind, it's not like we couldn't find someone with municipal accounting experience who could come in and do this job. We could poach them from any number of other communities. And so, that to me, I don't really follow the argument. I think we're doing way too much succession planning, if you will, in that respect. And Kevin Gill did say that he will be done by mid-26. He said that, and I'll take him at that. We're not pushing anyone out here, but people are getting to an age where they want to retire and enjoy life, and I respect that. And so I feel like we're kind of dancing around the issues of let's just get to the bottom line. Kevin Gill has ostensibly told us that's when he's done. And I respect that. Age-wise, it probably aligns with retirement and whatever else, sure. Steve, where are we, what is the notice requirement in your contract for when you would have to tell us your plan?
I don't think there is one.
I don't think there is either. But in practical terms, I do think that if you have clarity of what your plan is, being able to communicate that as much in advance, I think is really important. Because I don't know, this is not how I've done succession planning in the past, and when I've done it, I've had someone who'd be able to shadow. So the fact that we're looking to hire someone as an accountant and who ultimately is expected to take over for Kevin Gill makes sense. I think it's too long a timeline that we have for this, but nonetheless, that's okay, be that as it may. I continue to have no comprehension of how putting in the town accountant into the assistant town administrator role, but treating him like a CFO when we really don't need a CFO. And then having two people of similar age and likely similar completion of employment, it just doesn't, it makes absolutely no sense to me. One, I do question the value add of an assistant town administrator of a town of our size. I don't know what's not getting done currently. And so I'm like, all right, well, I know Steve is phenomenal at his job, but I'm not going to, and Steve, you even said, oh, at least, for a short term, there would be an assistant town administrator. So I'm not convinced you even think if you had to kind of.
I said that was up to the town council.
Right, but if you were to sharpen your pencil, I think like when you're talking about salary benefits, the pension aspects of that,
absolutely.
it's a lot. That's a big nut. And I don't feel as if, and maybe you're just because you're a superstar at it, but I don't feel as if what's getting done as having one person and solid department heads. I think that's a good way to manage a town of our size. So I'm not convinced that we even need an assistant town administrator. But if we do have someone in that role, why we would put in someone who is actually already has someone in place to be their successor makes no sense to me. Because Kevin Gill as assistant town administrator, to me, doesn't solve for anything. Because he'll be out of the picture, because by his own admission, he plans to retire, which I get. But why don't we have someone in place that one could come in and at least have an extension of continuity? If we're insisting upon assistant town administrator, why don't we have someone who would be able to come in and provide continuity, because they'd be an understudy of yours, Steve. So maybe they'd get the gig, maybe they wouldn't, but at least they'd have some institutional knowledge that you'd be able to impart upon them. Or two, why don't we think about it from the perspective of, all right, we need to have an understanding from Steve of where he stands, and then put someone in place, find someone who can then or this council selects, who can then shadow Steve for an appropriate period of time. I mean, Steve has a great support in Sherry. Sherry's institutional knowledge is second to none. I just don't see where this is, like, we're talking about succession planning with the town accountant, and I totally get that. I still don't see where the succession planning is for town administrator, which I think comparatively is a harder role to have succession planning for. And what is that? We're putting someone who's about to retire in as your assistant, Steve? That doesn't feel like that's not succession planning to me.
Assistant / CSCFO. Kevin does more than just a regular town accountant does.
Okay. But this new person's not going to be a CFO. Like, we don't need a CFO.
I think the person could be, well, I think you need someone that's not just a town accountant, but that gets involved with the bonding, that gets involved with all of those things. So I think that's an important part of the process.
I think it's an important part of a town accountant. Yeah,
a lot of town accountants don't have that ability or don't do it.
But your assistant is going to be someone who's about to retire, and that's not succession planning. That's my point. That's what I've read, and I've raised this before too.
Well, it's really an ad to staff. It's an ad to, we're doing an ad to staff of this CFO / assistant town administrator or whatever.
But two of these three people that we're talking about aren't going to presumably be here in 2027.
No. The two people aren't. I think my big fear around this, and by the way, the one reason why I think I wouldn't want to have Steve go and hire a deputy town administrator now, under the auspices that I'm going to train you for 2 years and then you're going to take over. And I know you like that idea, but frankly, the next town administrator, not frankly to you, in general, frankly, like the hiring of the next town administrator is not Steve's job, it's ours.
Correct.
And like, we're the ones who have to make that call, or whoever is sitting on the board whenever, you know, in 2057 when Steve really hangs them up. So I think the notion is we've decided on this add to staff, that like we're going to have a deputy town administrator and that it's been budgeted for and whatnot. And that's fine for now, whatever that is. And then so it is finding that, my fear is we hire that town accountant. What happens if Kevin leaves before you? Then what do we do? Like, then are we replacing them with a CFO type? Are we replacing them with the next deputy administrator type? Like, that's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is you can't find anybody. But, and like Ed said, we'll always be able to find people. Like, you know.
All I
There's
know
always
is
somebody
that,
to take a job.
all I know is that the town accountant is one of the hardest positions to fill in the industry.
Okay.
But it doesn't, but we're not solving for to me, the central role in all of this, which is your role, Steve. And
Oh, no, this was never gonna be solving for that, though.
I
This
know,
was,
but,
yeah.
but succession planning, we've talked
Yeah.
about this even at retreats and all the rest, it's always been about thinking about the town administrator. I think the town administrator, we want to talk about a difficult role to fill. I think filling your shoes is just as difficult as,
I
if
think
not
it's
more
easier.
so.
I think it's easier.
Not for someone good. And so so to the point of, okay, if we're going to have this assistant town administrator, why would this person why would we put a person in that role with a very defined expiration date as compared with someone who would have who would gain the institutional knowledge and then be able to maintain that to be an asset to whomever might be hired as town administrator? I'm not suggesting, Councilor Butler, that the assistant would become the town administrator, but I'm saying, but the assistant might be the assistant to the new town administrator, but have a lot of know-how that would be of benefit to the town administrator. But you're going to have.
But then your problem, and this is where Steve is saying, I think their issue now is, okay, so what do you hire? What would you hire? So you're suggesting you would keep Kevin in the town accountant role, and then you would hire a deputy, the potential, either a deputy town administrator, if we're going with that, and then when Kevin leaves, then we just find another town accountant.
No, I think having a shadow period is appropriate. I mean, I think this shadow period is a bit longer than necessary,
Yeah.
but be that as it may, I mean, I think you inevitably are going to need to, I think a successful succession planning requires overlap.
Yeah.
And so I think that what we're doing with Kevin and having basically an understudy who then is taking over makes sense. But in the case of Steve, I don't feel like we have succession planning for that role, for your role, Steve. Kevin Gill is not succession planning. Kevin Gill is able to train someone to take over his very important job that he does exceptionally well. But where does that leave us from it? So say you say, I'm going to retire as of February 1st. Where does that leave us from, as a town, from a succession planning? We don't have anyone to slot in. Say any number of things, Steve, were to occur, and who is the person that can step in or have that know-how, and who would have that know-how after 2026?
And we would have him to help us and assist us when he gives us notice, okay? Let's forget the idea that someone's going to, all of a sudden something's going to happen and Kevin's going to go or Steve's going to go. Since day one, I've known all three town administrators by different titles, executive secretary, town administrator. They've always had the Tommy Butler. That's how Tommy came up through the ranks. Tommy was the head accountant, okay? They've always followed that, and it's a very important role, and it's a different role. It's like the business manager of the school department. You've got to know all of the regs, all of the rules, how things are applied, and that's something that Steve needed when he got the job. He needed that person who dealt with the day-to-day stuff, the business aspects of it, knew the state laws, knew the regulations. That's a very, very important position, and it's luckily that position is such that someone we hire is going to want to keep it. They're going to want to continue to work with Steve. They're going to meet all of the staff. They're going to want to stay here. They want to make this part of their community. And they're going to realize how well we've taken care of Steve and Kevin. They're going to say, hey, this is a great town to work in, okay? Now, as far as the head job is concerned, and we've had one of the best. We're spoiled, okay? You know, I pray that whoever's on the council finds the talent that we found in Steve, okay? But the issue is, there's talent out there, and there are people going to apply, and you're going to have to go out in that market and compete. You're going to be able to say, okay, what are we willing to pay? Look at someone's experience. We had 5 or 6, I think, competition when Steve got the job. The 2 finalists was the town manager in Swampscott, town administrator of Swampscott, and Steve. And that's where the whole issue was, and I'm going to play this out because Steve understood it, his whole family understood it. You know, it was called a bag job. I had a former town official and his brother call it a bag job, yelling and screaming in the front of town hall when we made that appointment that night, okay? This guy did the job we expected him to. He was unique, the fact that he was on our town board of selectmen together. Steve was the person who brought us together. Steve could calm the waves. Steve could show his leadership ability, as well as to impress us on the fact of the ability of his understanding of town government. So it made it special. But it's very, very important to leave the appointment of the town administrator to the town council who receives the resignation. You can't do it ahead of time.
Nobody's
because it
suggesting
becomes
that,
very
but,
political.
but how is it that the fact you're putting in someone who's already said he's about to retire in as second in command, how is that succession planning?
It's not. And I agree.
It's not.
It's not. I agree.
And that's my whole,
100%.
that's my whole
I think
point.
the title issue is going to hang up. I have no problem with the fact that Kevin is sticking in there. Kevin's going to help train someone, bring him in
For his job.
for his job.
Which he,
Okay.
which I
Right,
have
right,
no issue with.
right.
It
So-
should happen.
So do you have any problem with giving Kevin a bump? I don't care what you call him. The fact that he's going to help out, get us through this transition as long as he can, bring this person to understand the town of Wakefield. I don't care what you call him. It's a temporary job. It's not something we'll continue. It has nothing to do with assistant town administrator. Nothing. Now, when the new administrator takes over, then that town council might consider, but you need a job description. You need an understanding what this person's going to do. I watched that May meeting. Nobody discussed how that person's going to help Steve, and how does that chain of command work? What's he really going to be in charge of? And until I know that, I'm totally against a deputy town administrator. In the short term, though, we need to replace Kevin's job. Kevin's the best person to train him without putting the pressure on Steve. The other alternative is if Kevin walked out tomorrow, okay? Steve's going to have to train the next guy, bring him in, find someone hopefully knows what they're doing. It makes it much, much harder. To go through a transition with Kevin, that's the only thing we should be talking about, Ed. And I think that's important that we proceed on that. But hold any discussion about a deputy position until the town council that receives his resignation addresses it.
I got to get Jonathan in here. Councilor Chine, sorry for the delay.
No worries, and I probably have kind of changed my thoughts or changed what I wanted to say as we've gone through. I think a couple of things that I just want to reinforce. So one is, there are 3 things that we're kind of talking about in this discussion that are related but not, entirely the same thing, right? So there's the succession plan for the town accountant, which I think we've created a plan that allows us to do that in a way that it sounds like I think we're all supportive of and see the need of. There's the question of succession for the town administrator, which is not as defined because of the nature of Mr. Gill's potential retirement plans vis-a-vis Mr. Mayo's. And then there's the question of, do we need an assistant town administrator? And I think on that third point, I do again want to reinforce that regardless of the names that end up in the jobs overall, and I've spent a lot of time, kind of looking at this through Mass Municipal Association. I've talked to a lot of people. in CFO or in town accountant roles in other communities and town administrator roles. I've talked to other people on boards. We are absolutely an outlier in terms of how we have staffed town hall. And I think part of the way we've gotten away with that is, quite frankly, because Mr. Mayo and Mr. Gill really do punch above their weight in terms of what they bring to the community. And I'm not saying that to toot their own horns, though I will in any other community whatsoever. I am saying that because I do think it's the reality. And so as we think about the long term, I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that it's both finding the right people for the roles, but also making sure that we have the right structure in place. And again, I think from what we've talked about today, we've done succession planning for the town accountant, which is great. I think that what we approved in May in terms of increasing the level of Mr. Gill's position so that regardless of his retirement plans, that can evolve into an assistant town administrator role, I think that that's the right thing from a structural standpoint. And then we'll just have personnel decisions to make in the future. And, Mr. Carney's absolutely right that that's not our job today to define out, what those personnel decisions will be when they emerge. Our job is to come up with a framework. And I think we've done so in terms of what we discussed in May. We're going to have more discussions about this because, again, there are unknowns that we just can't predict today. We don't know if we did hire an assistant town administrator, again, if they would be the right person to fill those shoes. Sometimes people work out, sometimes they don't. Sometimes people want a promotion, sometimes they don't. All of that is still up in the air. And so I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that, we've set up a structure right now that I think addresses two critical problems. We haven't gotten to the third one, and I think we should have more discussions about that as we go. But I do feel that at least, what we've put together is not an end of a conversation or not sort of wasted effort in terms of the problems that we do need to address. I think we've made some good first steps, and I hope we continue to do so.
Thank you, Councilor Chines. Any other comments from councilors? Okay, I haven't said much, but I voted against the FTE at our prior meeting and basically agreed with the concerns of Councilor Dombrowski, but as noted, that is not going to be my decision to make, but it sounds like some future town council will again revisit the situation after Steve leaves and whether they need a second assistant or not. I'd like to move on to item F, no idling signs at the schools, and since I believe the memo came from Councilor Vincent, I'm going to ask him to kick this off.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Since Lieutenant Anderson and Mr. Mullen aren't here tonight, we're not going to discuss substantively the requirements to have no idling signs at schools, but I did want to provide a quick timeline, especially for the two new members of the council that weren't here for our prior discussion. So back in September 11th, 2023, at a town council meeting, we discussed no idling signs on the Main Street side of Lake Q. In particular, we talked about E-Code Division 2, Chapter 211, Traffic Rules and Orders. And during that meeting, I mentioned that Chapter 90, Massachusetts General Law 16B, appeared to require having no idling signs at schools. On the 20th of September, then Chair Chines invited me to a meeting with Mr. Mullen and Mr. Mayo. At the end of that meeting, I sent them a follow-up email just saying, my takeaway from today's meeting is the Traffic Advisory Committee will assess the need for no idling signs at Wakefield schools. Is that correct? And they all, Mr. Mullen and Mr. Mayo confirmed that was their take as well. 8 days later, on 28th September, I sent the then Chair, Councilor Chines, Mr. Mullen, and Mr. Mayo a follow-up email. And I said, hey, since I raised the issue regarding no idling signs on school grounds, I took the time to prepare a memorandum for your review. That's the 2-page memo in your package, which I honestly did not put into the package. I believe Lieutenant Anderson did. I said, I know we agreed to have the Traffic Advisory Committee review the matter, but rather than having them start from scratch, I thought it was prudent to share my analysis. Later that same day, I sent Steve an email, which I copied then Chair Councilor Chines and Mr. Mullen, and I said, I'm a firm believer in the chain of command. Accordingly, it is not my place to provide my memo to the Traffic Advisory Committee. Accordingly, I respectfully request that you, Steve Mayo, forward my memo to Lieutenant Anderson and the Traffic Advisory Committee so this issue can be added to their agenda for an upcoming meeting. And that was September 28, 2023. The meeting minutes from the Traffic Advisory Committee meeting dated April 5th, 2024, approximately 6 months later, item 7 says, Lieutenant Anderson received a brief from Councilor Vincent that stated all schools, including preschool, should require signs. Mr. Mayo recommended speaking with Town Council Mullen regarding this matter. And then, according to our package, September of this year, Mr. Mullen sent an email to Lieutenant Anderson indicating that he concurred that no idling signs were required at the schools. Now, it's my understanding that our next meeting, we're going to be talking about this substantively. The only thing I do want to note is actually, 90 MGL 16B has been a law since 2009, and it was designed to improve and protect the school air quality. I do want to publicly praise the school committee, because I looked at the school committee, and they've actually had a no idling written policy since 2010. But of course, they don't have the legal authority to erect signs on school property. That falls purely within the purview of the town council in accordance with Wakefield Town Charter, Section 8.4B, and ECO Division 2, Chapter 211, Traffic Rules and Orders. And we'll discuss that, I assume, more significantly at our next meeting. But I just wanted to give you all a timeline of how we got here. Thank you, Chairman McLean.
Thank you, Councilor. Any questions from any of the council? Councilor Carney?
What are we discussing at the next meeting?
Basically, the law requires that no idling signs be placed within certain distances from schools.
Okay, so yeah.
And that law has been on the books for some time.
So this is based on the fact that Council Vincent's bringing it up tonight, and you don't want to take a vote on it until...
Yeah, until the the traffic advisory folks, Lieutenant Anderson and Councilor with an S. Mullen are here to actually present that to us next meeting. And I usually try to say, okay, where I can, okay, 2 weeks from now, we're going to be looking at this more seriously with a vote expected. Law's been around for a long time.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. I think schools are the place we should focus on first. We have a process that went through the traffic advisory, and now it will be arriving at our doorstep. Some cars do now automatically shut off. There are various rules if people care to read them. Articles have been written on this law being ignored, but it's not ignored in Reading. You go over to the Reading Y, you'll see the signs, and you don't have to freeze in your car. There are exceptions, if it's cold, etc. Councilor Dombrowski.
I do think that we have to there's a practical component to this. One, I think Lieutenant Anderson appropriately points out that this has not been an issue raised by the public to this point. And for anyone who has seen drop-offs or pickups outside of school, cars just aren't idling for the sake of idling. Cars are often idling because you've got 2 kids in the back, you do have the heat on, or you have the air conditioning on, whatever the case might be. Another kid's coming in, getting out. The last thing I think that we should be doing is adding more stress to what is already a difficult time for most parents, that are trying to get kids shuttled to school, get kids picked up from school and the like. I understand what the law says, but I think we could go through, CMRs and MGL for pretty much anything and find any number of instances where we may not technically be in compliance. And also in practical terms, are we going to be enforcing this? I don't expect we are. So it just feels like in some ways a vanity project in some respects. Does it make us technically compliant? Yes. But I think we also have to think about the practicality of this. And there are a lot of parents who are just trying to get their kids to school, get their kids from school, and get through the day. And so the idea of kind of adding this in to try to create more of an issue where one does not exist currently, I think is a problem. Yeah, technically, should we be doing this? There's a lot of things we should technically be doing that we don't do. So I think we can't. I don't think we can't miss the forest from the trees in this one. And I just don't see this being a significant public concern. I have never heard anyone saying they're looking for this, and I think that it's going to have an impact on people that's not going to be beneficial.
Any other comments from councilors? Councilor Carney.
Yeah, I have to mention as a liaison to the committee that the Sustainability Committee has brought this up So I know that they brought it up, so I don't want to, deny the fact that it's been discussed. But beyond that, and I'm not sure, I've been out of the loop in regards to bus operations for 6, 7 years now. But with buses, they used to allow us, with passengers on board, okay, to allow us in the operation of business to keep the bus idling. Now, that could have changed. I don't want to, I'll look it up and I'll check it out. But these parents are going there. Now, just visit the Doll Bear School around 2:30 in the afternoon on a 20-degree day. And you're right, they have 2 kids in the back. The mother has 2 kids in the back who aren't old enough to go to school. She's picking up a 3rd child, and she's sitting there waiting for the kids to come out of the school to rush in to get them. I honestly think this has a negative impact, the fact that they're even discussing this. If it's a law, it's a law, and we won't apply it, but there were a lot of, the item here's this past couple of weeks, I was reading where one of our police officers brought a person to court because their inspection sticker expired. Things were different, 20, 30 years ago. And they're not enforcing laws today. We have all these laws they're not enforcing. I have no problem if we turned our back on this one, but that's up to the council.
Yeah, I think if you read the regulations, you'll see the exceptions. There are reasonable exceptions in the regulations. I agree. It's not probably going to be terribly, it's not going to be enforced necessarily either. It is, however, the law.
And I would just add, on a sign that says no idling, you're not going to have all those exceptions listed. So if someone on a 15-degree day you're there with the kids in the car, like, oh, darn, I can't, I can't have my vehicle. It's like, I get what you're saying, and that's why maybe we could just, on our website, we can put it out there. I think there's other ways to get out that information. The schools can put it in newsletters or whatever the case might be to let parents know that. But it's going to have such a detrimental impact on.
But we could do
people.
both. I don't see it as a major stressor. I mean, no parking here to corner. I see that ignored often. I think the signs may be somewhat ignored too. And if you're, if it's a fall day and a nice day like today and 78 degrees, turn the engine off. It's not a big deal. Anyway, but it is law. It is. We should be, I think, compliant with it. But we can take a vote, and if we don't get a majority, we will avoid some more of what you and I have called sign pollution.
Sign pollution.
So that's TBD, folks. I can't see Councilor Chines' hand up. Please say no.
Yeah, no, it's not up.
I do not, no.
Okay, I'm going to...
The only thing I'd add is this feels like that sign, the people who we said no to on the sign from the Traffic Advisory Committee, the person who complained about it. And granted, look, it's different because it's state law. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it'll be widely ignored, and we're going to spend money to put up signs for no good reason. It just seems to me like lunacy, and frankly, it feels like this is one of those things where, don't ask the questions you don't want the answers to. And I'm not sure how it all popped up, but I imagine Councilor Vincent's going to tell me that.
He may. Councilor Vincent.
Yeah, vanity and lunacy. Okay. I only researched this issue because no idling signs went up overnight on the Main Street side of the lake. I researched the governing regulation, Chapter 211, and then I looked at Massachusetts general law. If you look at Lieutenant Anderson's email, he says in there, Councilor Vincent doesn't necessarily want to have to comply with this. He is just asking the question of the Traffic Advisory Committee as to whether this is required or not. The Traffic Advisory Committee, per Mr. Mayo's request, asked Town Council Mullen to give a legal opinion. And next week, or 2 weeks when we meet, he can share that legal opinion with us. I just researched the law, and I presented it to the Traffic Advisory Committee and asked them their opinion. And frankly, I never would have researched this, but for the fact there's no idling signs were put on the Main Street side of the lake, and therefore I wanted to pull the strings and said whether that was required by law, and I happen to find that it is required by law at the schools.
Right, but you found that out, but you didn't need to, you opted to bring this up as a thing. You didn't actually need to bring it up.
But that's my prerogative, is it not?
It is your prerogative.
Well, I just say to that, Counselor Butler, that, I think 40A is crazy, but this council has had a habit of wanting to try to comply with laws that we didn't necessarily endorse or agree with 100%. So, it's just another one of those things. But that is to be discussed at our next meeting and voted on. I'd like to move, if I don't see anybody having a burning desire to talk more about this, to item 8, appointments, Economic Development Council. I'm going to turn to the people on the Economic Development Council and see whether they have any wisdom for us relative to these appointments.
Sure. Can I make a motion? Talking to Erica Kinda and the chair, I'd like to appoint Ann Hadley, Nithyan Ramakrishnan, and Annie Silva to the 3-year term ending October 31st, 2027, and appoint Tanya Walker to the 1-year term ending October 31st, 2025.
Second it.
And questions from council. The first thing I'll ask you, Councilor, about is does that, because I'm not totally familiar with the names, just set me straight, are the first three names the people who are already serving?
No, so two are currently serving and reapplied. The third person who reapplied cannot make Wednesday night meetings, and that's when the meetings are.
I see, okay.
So replaced with 2 business owners in town, which I think are great. One replaced with a business owner, and then the 4th person who's replacing somebody who left is also a business owner in town.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Further discussion other than my question there? You'll have to tell me, Sherry, if Councilor Chines has questions.
I'll just say, I'm not familiar with the situation with Will Strong, so I'll have to defer to Councilor Budd on that. I've not been made aware of that piece, but if that's what she's representing.
Okay.
But I will say that Will Strong has had a lot of very good ideas for the Economic Development Council, and I think he has been committed. So if it is a matter of his schedule rendering, I don't know why he would have applied if he was unavailable.
The meetings used to be a different date.
Right.
They got moved to Wednesdays, so he can't make Wednesday meetings.
Okay, we have a motion seconded. Any questions from the councilors or Councilor Chines, who I cannot see? No?
No.
Okay, in that case, I will take a roll call vote on the motion to appoint the individuals referenced by Councilor Butt. Councilor Chines?
Yes.
Councilor Butler?
Yes.
Councilor Vincent?
Yes.
Councilor Butt?
Yes.
Councilor Dombrowski?
Aye.
Councilor Carney?
Yes.
And Councilor McLean is yes, so that's 7-0. Sherry. Moving on, Housing Trust. We have expiring terms for Finance Committee member, Council on Aging member, and Town Council member. I am the Town Council member currently. Council on Aging member is Maureen Hickey, correct. And Bill Boudry is the Finance Committee member. All 3 are willing to continue. So if no one has any objections, I would entertain a motion to appoint. Do we have terms on these, Town Administrator?
Yes, November 1st of this year through October 31st of 2027.
Through 2027.
So we will have, may have to replace one.
Right. But for now, we'll move on.
So I would move that we appoint the slate as described by the chair for the 3-year terms from November 1st, 2024 through October 31st, 2027, with our thanks.
Second.
Second by Councilor Carney. Any questions from the Town Council?
If you weren't on the council or the finance committee, or I forget the third one, then you're off this one too?
That is correct. So I would
Okay.
be timing out,
Okay,
potentially.
potentially.
Yes.
We'll see. We'll believe it when we see it.
Yes. Councilor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. Sherry, could you just assist us here for a moment? So even though we are elected members of the town council, when we get appointed to other committees, for instance, I got appointed to the Housing Production Plan Advisory Committee, I still have to go in separately, get sworn in order to serve on that subcommittee. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So any elected member on the Housing Trust or the Environmental Sustainability Committee or the WCAT Advisory Group, all those, we have to separately go and get sworn in again.
Yes,
Correct.
And that's according
correct.
to Mr. Mullen.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Even, even if though that, it seems odd, because then it would seem that then it wouldn't be part of your town councilorship, and you would be enabled to stay on. Oh, is that the same question?
I've talked to Tom about this.
Okay.
And Tom says it is a separate
That's-
body,
all right.
and therefore you need to be sworn in.
So I haven't been sworn in yet.
Don't,
Right.
yeah, okay. Make sure you take care of that, will you? We
It's
talk
more
about that
I'm
off
questioning
camera.
whether or not you get kicked off then if you're off the town council. Like, that's my concern, is not so much,
The Affordable Housing Trust Fund is written that if you are
Right.
not on the town council,
So-
finance committee,
so-
council and agent, you no
you
longer
you
serve.
can't, you're not eligible no
You're not
matter
eligible
what.
Then you're
anyway,
not
yeah.
eligible.
Okay.
Well, you could be appointed as a member of the public if you applied to the council.
Okay.
Because that one was created by an act at town meeting and matched the statute
Right.
for the Affordable Housing Trust.
But-
It's a little bit different.
I'm just thinking for the housing production plan, you and I are on, but we also have members of the public who are on.
Yeah, and all of us have to be sworn in. I think there's 12
So-
members, 12 voting members, and all of us have to be sworn in.
But when you, if you depart the town council.
Well, now you're
eh,
speculating, engaging in
Yeah,
conjecture,
yeah.
which we don't need
No,
to
no,
discuss
no.
tonight.
If one does that, then are you off? Like, that's why I don't understand why you would be automatically off then.
If you and I, as the town council representatives on the Housing Production Plan Advisory Committee, are no longer serving on the town council, then automatically our term as the town council representatives on the HPP Advisory Committee terminates.
Are we on officially at, like, is our membership in the
Yes.
housing
Yes.
production plan
Yes.
strictly based on
It's a
our town
precondition
council?
of
Yes,
your-
Okay.
we are the
Yes.
two
All
town
right, then.
council
Yes, never mind.
representatives,
All right.
yeah.
These three here are seats, one for Council on Aging,
Right.
one for Town Council, one for FinCom, so they're seats. So you have to be a member of that entity in order to be in that seat. And if you're no longer that part member of the entity, then the seat becomes vacant.
Right.
Besides the Environmental Sustainability Committee, what other committees have,
Well, it would be all those advisory groups, WCAT advisory group, I don't have the whole list.
oh, the
with me
Traffic
tonight.
Advisory Committee too?
No, because you're not a voting member. It's if you're a voting member, not as a liaison.
Okay.
As a liaison, we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But if you're a voting member of another body, and on many of when we had the first MBTA 40A, the first one,
Yeah.
when Councilor Smith Galvin was on there, she was the town council representative on that. All right, that's a separate body that you're serving on, right? So you have to, according to Mr. Mullen, you have to separately get sworn in to serve on that. That's why he and I have to get separately, I have done it, but you have to get separately sworn in for the housing production plan.
So it's strictly by the wording of the vote of this council, of whether you're a voting member or not?
Right. If you're a voting member of that body, then you have to get sworn in. If you're just a liaison, you don't.
With the exception of the Housing Trust, and that was created by town meeting and
Yeah, yeah.
followed the statute.
And that's required by law.
Yeah.
So since this is something new, thank you for finding out. Sherry, can you send emails to everyone that needs to get sworn in
I think
for
she
whatever
has.
board?
She
Okay,
has.
awesome. So
Yeah.
then I didn't get one. I'm not gonna worry about it. But, yeah, if you are the keeper of that information going forward and, making sure people get sworn in, so we don't have to have revotes, that would be great.
Any other questions from the council? Seeing none and hearing nothing from Sherry regarding Counselor Chine's hand, which I wouldn't be able to see, we'll take a roll call vote. Counselor Chines?
Yes.
Counselor Butler?
Yes.
Counselor Vincent?
Yes.
Counselor Butt?
Yes.
Counselor Dabrowski?
Aye.
Counselor Carney?
Yes.
And Counselor McLean is yes, as well as 7-0 Sherry. We can then move on to item 9, which is donation, fire department donation. I believe we have a $2,000 donation. Is that not correct, Vice Chair?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the $2,000 donation to the fire department from Hobbs Brooks Real Estate with our thanks.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just to, Do we send letters, of appreciation when we get these donations? Is there some?
I think the departments normally do that. I
The
think
department
it's
does.
department specific.
The departments think of that? Okay.
Any further discussion?
Does this normally happen? Does the fire department normally get checks from anybody? It seems like an odd thing.
It's doesn't happen every day. Yeah.
Occasionally, not as, some get more, like the library gets a lot, obviously.
Yeah, no, the
Senior center gets a
library, I
lot,
think
but
of it as-
Hobbs Brooks manages a lot of the real estate up on Audubon Road. And I think there's
Oh.
been, the fire alarms go off there a lot, so they're work with the fire department a lot on those things, so, yeah.
Okay.
Appreciation of,
Yeah.
probably
Sure.
the amount of usage.
Yeah.
Okay, roll call vote. Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Butler.
Yeah.
Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Aye.
Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And I am yes, so that's 7-0. Sherry, thank you very much, everybody. Approval of minutes, item 10.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the council approve the meeting minutes of October 7th, 2024.
And I would second.
Motion and second, any discussion? Seeing none and seeing no hands, I will take a roll call vote. Counselor Chines.
Yes.
Counselor Butler.
Yes.
Counselor Vincent.
Yes.
Counselor Butt.
Yes.
Counselor Dombrowski.
Abstaining.
Counselor Carney.
Yes.
And I am yes, so we have 6 with 1 abstention. Counselor Dombrowski abstaining. Sherry. Announcements from the counselors. Counselor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair McLean. 3 things. The Wakefield Firefighters Relief Association is having their Halloween Hustle 5K race on Saturday, the 26th at 10 in the morning. It starts at Church Street. Mr. Mayor and I are pleased to announce that Rededication Day for the Soldiers and Sailors Civil War Memorial is going to be on Saturday, May 31st, starting at noon. We had a very good meeting with a multitude of people last week, including the Grand Union Army of the
Public.
that's going to really help us with our rededication endeavors. And the last thing I want to mention is the police department. A couple of Fridays ago, I was jogging, and there was an injured duck on Main Street on the sidewalk. And I stopped and I called the police department, and they sent an officer out there who stayed with the duck until animal rescue could come by. I continued on my run, and when I got on another street in town, I saw 2 police officers rendering medical assistance to a resident. Then I jogged back on Main Street, and the police officer was still there with the injured duck until our animal control guy picked it up and took it to a local veterinarian. And I just was really impressed with the professionalism I saw in the dedication I saw from the police officers at both locations. And the police officer over on Main Street with the duck had a lot of people stop by and ask him about the duck. And I think it really was very positive experience that this town takes the time to take one of our wild creatures and make sure that it's tended to, as opposed to just, ignoring it. I was very impressed by that. That's all I have, Chair McLean.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Chines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I appreciate everyone's putting up with my being remote today. We've had unfortunately, some unexpected things happen in the day today, which prevented me from being there. But I did just want to mention a couple of things. First of all, just a reminder that early voting for the presidential election is underway. Hours are posted on the Town Hall website, and just want to give a huge thank you to Town Clerk Sheeran and all of her staff for the hard work that goes into it. Running an election is not easy, and the fact that they make it look easy and seamless is just a testament to their professionalism and the great job that they do. So please remember to go vote. Also did want to highlight that there will be some drop-in office hours for the Leo Fuel Assistance Program. That'll be on Wednesday from 9:30 to 11:30 at the Senior Center. Folks may remember we unfortunately no longer have our Wakefield Fuel Assistance Program in place, but we can still help connect people into the Leo program, and those office hours will be a good opportunity for people to learn about that. And then finally, just wanted to mention Pumpkins on the Plaza are this Thursday from 6 to 8. Great opportunity to see some great artwork by our Wakefield High School students, and I will be having office hours in the library during part of that time, so please stop in and say hello. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other announcements? Counselor Dombrowski?
I just wanted to remind everyone that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and true to form for a really incredible organization, Wakefield Alliance Against Violence, they hosted a 5K fun run and race this past Saturday. It was well attended. Congratulations to Officer Amy Rando, who organized the event and just did a phenomenal job. It was great to see so many people from all different ages participating, from children all the way to, I think, people age 70 plus were there, along with a couple of my colleagues. So it was great to see everyone. So if you want to learn more information about the organization, or if you or someone you know needs any help, waveonline.org, WAVonline.org is their website for information and resources. Incredibly important. And so I thank them for the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, and I would congratulate Counselor Chines on his, I believe, second place finish this year at the wave race. There was a very fast Wakefield, probably a Wakefield youngster running immensely low pace or fast paced miles in first place this year. I was.
It's hard to compete with a varsity athlete that's 30 years younger.
Despite me cajoling you to catch that young man. Yeah, I was on the street watching, trying to hopefully have the runners be able to go through the farmers market without having cars turn into them. Didn't run this year, but it was a great event, and it was well attended, and I think hopefully some significant funds were raised. And thanks also to Representative Wan for being there.
Absolutely.
He attends an awful lot of events and provides support as well in more ways than one. Did you have something, Councilor Carney? Nope. Okay. Councilor Butt?
Yeah, just a couple little things. Just wanted to thank Tracy Rizzo, who was our recovery coordinator, who left town. Social media serves its purpose. Saw that on the police department's Facebook page. And then also Councilor Chines, myself, and Town Administrator Steve Mayo went to the swearing in of our newest police officer, Olivia Fuller, who is a graduate of Wakefield High School. So welcome her to Wakefield, and in this new position, really excited to continue to work with her and all the other officers, the great officers that we have over there. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? And just, so the council knows, one of our many agenda items next week, next meeting in 2 weeks, will also be an ARPA update from the town administrator as to where we are in ARPA. Item 12, matters not anticipated for the agenda. Anybody have anything burning? No, I do not see anything. In which case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting with a next meeting on November 4th at 7 p.m.
Seconded.
Motion and second. Can we do this one without the?
Absolutely.
I'm going to do a show of hands. All in favor, say aye. Jonathan, raise your hand. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Close this meeting at 9:54 p.m.
I never